Mechanic gives free repairs to single mom, not knowing her ex-husband was a famous actor. The words had appeared in the local paper's community spotlight section, a small headline buried between ads for lawn care and a church fundraiser. No one had paid it much attention then, but for Sarah Miller and Jack Reynolds, those words represented the beginning of a journey neither had expected. Sarah's fingers trembled against the steering wheel as her ancient Honda Civic sputtered and coughed its way down Palmer Street. The check engine light had been glaring at her for weeks, an angry orange eye she couldn't afford to acknowledge. Just like the pile of bills on her kitchen counter, just like the late notices, just like everything else in her life that seemed to be falling apart. "Not now," she whispered, her voice breaking as the car jerked violently. "Please, not now." But machines like life rarely listen to desperate pleas. The engine made a terrible grinding sound before the car lurched once more and died completely, smoke rising from under the hood like some final dramatic exhale. Sarah rested her forehead against the steering wheel, allowing herself exactly 3 deep breaths, her limit for self-pity these days. In the rearview mirror, she caught sight of 6-year-old Emma in her booster seat, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit with the button eyes Sarah had sewn back on countless times. "Is the car sick again, Mommy?" Emma asked, her voice small but serious in that way children have when they understand more than adults think they do. "Just tired, baby," Sarah answered, forcing a smile as she turned to look at her daughter. Like how you get tired after a long day at school. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching in Emma's honey blonde hair. So like her father's, a thought Sarah immediately pushed away. After 2 years, it shouldn't still hurt to see him in their daughter's features. But it did. She checked her phone, 4:17 p.m. 23 minutes until she had to be at her second job waiting tables at George's. Being late again would mean being fired, which would mean not making rent, which would mean no. She wouldn't go down that spiral again, one problem at a time. The nearest mechanic was Reynolds Auto, just visible down the block. The blue and white sign swung gently in the October breeze, the R in Reynolds slightly crooked. Sarah had driven past it 100 times but had never stopped in. Her ex-husband had always handled car issues with his preferred high-end shop in the city, before everything fell apart. "Come on, sweetie," Sarah said, grabbing her purse and Emma's backpack. "We're going on a little adventure." Emma's face brightened at the word adventure, a small victory Sarah held close as they walked the short distance to the auto shop, the wind whipping strands of her chestnut hair across her face. The smell hit her first. Motor oil, metal, and something faintly sweet, like the coffee brewing in the small pot at the corner of the cluttered front desk. The garage itself was spotlessly organized, a contrast to the paper-strewn office. Tools hung in perfect alignment on pegboards, each with its shadow outlined beneath it. "Hello?" she called, adjusting Emma on her hip, though at 6 she was getting too heavy to carry. Another reminder of how quickly time was passing, how quickly everything changed. Be right there," a deep voice called from beneath a raised Ford pickup. Sarah watched as a man rolled out from under the truck on a creeper, sitting up in one fluid motion that spoke of years of practice. He was perhaps in his late 30s, with the solid build of someone who worked with his hands for a living. Grease smudged his forearms, and there was a streak of it across his forehead, where he must have wiped away sweat. But what caught Sarah's attention were his eyes, a warm amber brown that crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled at them. "Sorry about that," he said, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. "Jack Reynolds, Sarah Miller, and this is Emma." She set her daughter down, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her wrinkled waitress uniform and the coffee stain on the sleeve she hadn't had time to properly wash out. "My car broke down just up the street," she continued, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's been making noises for a while, but today it just gave up." Jack nodded, his expression serious but kind. "They do that sometimes. Push them too long and they decide to go on strike." He crouched down to Emma's level. "And what's your friend's name?" he asked, gesturing to the stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her small hands. "Mr. Carrots," Emma replied, her shyness evaporating as it always did when someone showed interest in her beloved toy. "He's sick too. His stuffing is coming out." She turned the rabbit to display a small tear in its side, wisps of white cotton poking through. Jack studied the rabbit with the same serious consideration he might give an engine part. "Well, I mostly fix cars, but I bet we could find something for Mr. Carrots too. What do you think?" Emma nodded solemnly, and Sarah felt something twist in her chest, a bittersweet ache. Her daughter had grown accustomed to disappointment these past 2 years, had learned to expect less, to ask for less. The fact that she still believed someone might help her fix her toy was both a relief and a heartbreak. "Let me take a look at your car," Jack said, rising to his feet again. "Where exactly is it?" "Just up the block. The blue Honda that's seen better days." Sarah glanced at her watch and couldn't contain her grimace. 4:32 p.m. "I hate to ask, but I'm supposed to be at work in 11 minutes. Is there any chance I can give you a ride?" Jack offered before she could finish. "Let me just grab my tow kit and I'll bring your car in after I drop you off." "I couldn't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I offered." His smile was easy, without expectation or judgment. That's how it works here in Riverside. Neighbors help neighbors. Sarah wanted to explain that she wasn't really a neighbor, that she'd moved to this smaller, more affordable town after the divorce, that she still felt like an outsider here. But there wasn't time. And something in Jack's straightforward kindness made her hesitate to complicate things with her messy history. "Thank you," she said simply. "I work at Georgia's on Main. Good pizza there," Jack commented as he reached for a set of keys hanging on a board near the office door. "Emma, you want to help me pick out a bandage for Mr. Carrots while your mom fills out some paperwork?" Emma nodded eagerly, and Sarah watched as Jack led her daughter to a small first aid kit, explaining very seriously that sometimes stuffed animals needed special care, just like people did. The paperwork was standard: contact information, car details, service authorization. Sarah's hand hovered over the signature line, her mind racing with calculations. Even with her employee discount at the department store where she worked mornings, even with tips from Georgia's, even with the child support that sometimes arrived on time and sometimes didn't. "I should mention," she began, her voice lower, as Emma was still occupied with Jack and the rabbit first aid operation. "I don't think I can afford much beyond the absolute basics right now. If it's something major, I might need to..." "What?" She didn't know how to finish that sentence. Walk everywhere? Lose her jobs? Sink even further into debt? Jack glanced up from where he was carefully placing a small adhesive bandage on Mr. Carrot's side, Emma watching with solemn concentration. Something flickered in his eyes. Not pity, which Sarah had grown to recognize and resent, but something more like understanding. "Let's figure out what's wrong first," he said. "Then we'll talk options. No sense worrying before we know what we're dealing with." The ride to Giorgio's was mercifully quick. Emma chatted happily in the back seat of Jack's pickup about Mr. Carrot's successful operation, while Sarah checked her phone obsessively, watching the minutes tick closer to her shift. "I'll bring your car by tomorrow morning, once I've had a chance to look it over properly," Jack said as he pulled up in front of the restaurant. "What time works for you?" "I have to be at Talbot's by 9, Sarah replied, gathering her purse. "But Emma's school doesn't start until 8:30, so any time after that would be perfect. I'll swing by around 8:45 with an update." He handed her a business card with the shop's information. "My cell's on there too, in case you need to reach me." Sarah thanked him again, helped Emma out of the truck, and hurried into Giorgio's with exactly 1 minute to spare. As she tied her apron around her waist, she realized she hadn't asked how much the diagnostic would cost. Another worry to add to her collection. The evening rush at Giorgio's was relentless. By the time her shift ended at 10:30, Sarah's feet ached and her lower back had developed a persistent throb. Emma had fallen asleep on the small break room couch, Mr. Carrots tucked under her chin, the small bandage still perfectly in place. Sarah's manager, Marco, gave them a ride home to their small apartment on the edge of town. Emma barely stirred as Sarah carried her up the 2 flights of stairs, laid her gently in her bed, and removed her shoes. For a moment, Sarah simply sat on the edge of the bed, watching her daughter sleep, tracing with her eyes the delicate curve of Emma's cheek, the flutter of her eyelashes against her skin. This was why she kept going. This was why she worked 2 jobs and stretched every dollar until it screamed. This little person who trusted her completely, who deserved so much more than Sarah felt she could provide. She moved through her nighttime routine on autopilot, checking that the doors were locked, setting out Emma's clothes for the morning, washing her face with the drugstore cleanser that had replaced her once expensive skincare routine. As she crawled into bed, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Jack from Reynolds Auto. Got your car back to the shop. We'll have answers for you tomorrow. Hope your shift went well." Sarah stared at the message, surprised by the small bloom of warmth it created in her chest. When was the last time someone had asked about her day? When was the last time someone had offered help without her having to beg for it? She typed back a simple "thank you" before setting her alarm and falling into an exhausted sleep. Morning arrived too quickly, as it always did. The routine was familiar. Wake Emma, make breakfast, pack lunch, brush teeth, comb hair, find the missing shoe that was inevitably under the bed, or in the hamper, or once, memorably, in the refrigerator. "Is Mr. Fix-It bringing our car back today?" Emma asked as she spooned cereal into her mouth, milk dribbling down her chin. "Mr. Fix-It?" Sarah echoed, wiping Emma's face with a napkin. "The man who fixed Mr. Carrots." Emma held up her rabbit, the bandage now slightly crooked but still firmly attached. "He said he fixes things and our car is broken, so he's Mr. Fix-It." "His name is Mr. Reynolds," Sarah corrected gently. "And yes, he's going to tell us what's wrong with the car today." They walked the 6 blocks to Riverside Elementary, Emma's small hand warm in Sarah's as they navigated morning traffic. Sarah dropped her daughter off with a kiss and a promise to see her after school, then began the longer walk toward Talbot's, her mind already churning with worry about the car. Jack was waiting outside her apartment building when she returned at 8:40, leaning against his truck with 2 coffee cups in hand. He straightened when he saw her approach, offering one of the cups. "You look like you could use this," he said. "Black with 1 sugar, right? Marco at Giorgio's mentioned that's how you take it when I picked up breakfast this morning." Sarah accepted the coffee, surprised again by the small, thoughtful gesture. "Thank you. How's my car?" Jack's expression grew serious. "It's not great news, I'm afraid. Your timing belt's shot and it's damaged the valves. The head gasket's also leaking. In a car this old with this many miles." He hesitated. "The repairs would cost more than the car is worth." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She'd been prepared for bad news, but not this bad. Not car replacement bad. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter in her mouth. "I see." She managed, her mind already racing through impossible calculations. No public transit ran to Talbot's. Too far to walk. She couldn't afford a new car. Couldn't afford this repair either, from the sound of it. "I know that's not what you wanted to hear," Jack continued, his voice gentle. "But I have a proposition for you." Sarah tensed. She'd heard propositions before from men who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. From men who thought a single mom must be desperate enough to accept whatever crumbs of attention they offered, whatever strings they attached. "I have a 2010 Toyota Corolla in my lot," Jack continued, seemingly unaware of her sudden wariness. "It was a trade-in that I've been fixing up in my spare time. It's not fancy, but it's reliable. Low mileage, good condition. I'd be willing to work out a payment plan that fits your budget." Sarah blinked, her defenses momentarily disarmed. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Jack shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both casualness and certainty. "I know enough. You're working 2 jobs to take care of your daughter. You're doing it on your own. And everyone deserves a break sometimes." The kindness in his voice made her throat tighten unexpectedly. She took a sip of coffee to hide the sudden sheen of tears in her eyes. "I can't accept charity," she said finally. "I need to stand on my own 2 feet. "It's not charity. It's community," Jack replied. "Look, I've been where you are. Single parent, struggling to make ends meet. My daughter Lily is 13 now, but those early years after her mom left were rough." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that somehow spoke of old wounds still tender to the touch. "Sometimes you need a hand up. That's all I'm offering." Sarah studied him, looking for hidden motives, for the catch that experience had taught her was always there. But his gaze was steady, his expression open. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "Can I call you later today?" "Of course," Jack nodded. "No pressure, just an option on the table." He handed her a folder. "Here's the full diagnosis for your Honda and some information about the Toyota, including what I think is a fair monthly payment. Take your time." Sarah tucked the folder into her purse, finished her coffee, and thanked him again. As she watched him drive away, she felt a strange mixture of gratitude and unease. People weren't this kind without reason. Life had taught her that lesson repeatedly over the past 2 years. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customer service at Talbot's, a hurried lunch break spent reviewing Jack's proposal, and a second shift at George's. By the time she picked Emma up from the after-school program, Sarah was no closer to a decision. The Toyota was a good deal, far better than she could get at any dealership, especially with her credit score battered by the divorce. The monthly payments Jack proposed were within her budget, barely. But accepting meant owing him, meant creating a connection that went beyond a simple business transaction. And connections, Sarah had learned, could be dangerous, especially when they involved kind men with warm eyes who fixed stuffed rabbits and remembered how you took your coffee. As she tucked Emma into bed that night, her daughter asked the question Sarah had been dreading. "Is our car coming home tomorrow?" Sarah smoothed Emma's hair back from her forehead. "No, sweetie. Our car is, well, it's too sick to fix." Emma's brow furrowed. "Like when Grandpa got too sick and went to heaven?" The innocent question landed like a physical blow. Sarah's father had died just months before her marriage imploded. A 1-2 punch that had left her reeling. Something like that, Sarah managed. But Mr. Reynolds has another car that might become ours. A new car? Emma's eyes widened. With no check engine light? Sarah couldn't help but smile at that. Yes, with no check engine light. I like Mr. Reynolds, Emma declared, snuggling deeper under her covers. He fixed Mr. Carrot's real good. See? She held up the rabbit, its bandage now decorated with small drawings Emma had added during the day. Hearts and stars and what appeared to be a car. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table with Jack's folder open before her. The Toyota was practical, reliable, exactly what she needed. The payment plan was more than fair. There was no rational reason to refuse. And yet, Sarah's fingers hovered over her phone. It would be so easy to text Jack, accept his offer, solve at least one of her problems. But something held her back, some protective instinct honed by disappointment. Her ex-husband, David Taylor, had seemed kind once too. Charming, generous, attentive. America's favorite romantic lead off screen as well as on. Until the fame grew too large, the temptations too numerous, the marriage too constricting. Until he decided that the family they'd created was simply another role he no longer wished to play. The settlement had been generous on paper. But David's career had hit turbulence around the same time as their divorce. Projects falling through, a poorly received film, whispers of difficult behavior on set. The child support became irregular. The promised college fund for Emma remained theoretical. And Sarah, determined to make it on her own rather than fight her ex-husband through the courts and tabloids, had retreated to this smaller life in Riverside, away from Hollywood's harsh spotlight. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd fallen in love with an actor and had never seen the performance until it was too late. With a deep breath, Sarah picked up her phone and typed a message to Jack. The Toyota sounds perfect. I accept your payment plan offer. Thank you. His response came almost immediately. Great. Come by the shop tomorrow after you drop Emma at school. We'll handle the paperwork and get you on the road. Sarah set down her phone, a curious mixture of relief and anxiety swirling in her chest. One problem solved. 100 more to go. But it was progress. The next morning after dropping Emma at school, Sarah walked to Reynolds Auto with a strange sense of anticipation. The air was crisp with early autumn, leaves beginning to turn at the edges. The sky that particular shade of blue that seemed reserved for October. Jack was working on a minivan when she arrived, but he immediately rolled out from underneath when he heard the bell above the door. Morning. He greeted her, that easy smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Sarah accepted the offer, pouring herself a cup from the small machine, while Jack washed his hands and retrieved the paperwork from his office. The garage felt different in daylight, warmer somehow despite the concrete floor and metal tools. A classic rock station played softly from speakers mounted in the corners, and the walls were decorated with a mix of car memorabilia and children's artwork, presumably from Jack's daughter. So here's what I'm thinking, Jack said, spreading the papers on the counter. Monthly payments for 24 months, no interest. I'll throw in the first oil change free, and if anything major comes up in the first 6 months, we'll work something out. Sarah reviewed the paperwork carefully, her natural caution making her look for the catch, the hidden clause, the fine print that would make this deal less miraculous than it seemed. This is very generous, she said finally, unable to find anything concerning in the agreement. I'm not sure why you're doing this for a complete stranger, but thank you. Jack shrugged, that same casual gesture that somehow contained multitudes. Like I said, I've been where you are. When Lily was little and her mom left, I was drowning. A customer of mine, older gentleman named Frank, noticed I was struggling. He started bringing me dinner twice a week, said his wife always cooked too much. Later I found out he'd been asking her to make extra specifically for us. He leaned against the counter, coffee cup cradled in his large, capable hands. After Frank passed, I found out he'd left me enough money in his will to buy this place from my old boss. Changed my life and Lily's. All because someone saw we were struggling and decided to help without being asked. The story settled around Sarah like a warm blanket. There was nothing calculated in the way Jack told it. No manipulation, just a simple truth offered as explanation. I'm trying to be more like Frank, Jack continued. That's all. Sarah nodded, understanding flooding through her. Pay it forward. Exactly. Jack smiled, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other, a current of something undefined passing between them. Sarah broke the connection first, looking down at the paperwork and picking up the pen. Wait, where do I sign? The Toyota was exactly as Jack had described. Not fancy, but clean and well-maintained, with relatively low mileage for its age. The dark blue paint had a few minor scratches and the upholstery showed signs of wear. But when Jack turned the key, the engine purred to life without hesitation. "No check engine light," Sarah commented with a small smile. "Not if I did my job right," Jack replied. "Want to take it for a test drive?" They drove through Riverside, the Corolla handling smoothly as Jack pointed out its features. Sarah found herself relaxing into the seat, the constant tension in her shoulders easing slightly. A working car meant security. It meant keeping her jobs. It meant one less thing to worry about in the constantly shifting Jenga tower of her life. "What do you think?" Jack asked as they pulled back into the garage lot. "It's perfect," Sarah admitted. "I can't thank you enough." "You can thank me by taking care of yourself and Emma," Jack replied. "And maybe by letting me know how Mr. Carrots is doing from time to time." Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her with its ease. "I'm sure Emma would be happy to provide regular updates on his condition." After completing the paperwork and receiving the keys, Sarah found herself reluctant to leave. There was something comforting about Jack's presence, about the ordered chaos of his garage, about the simple kindness he offered without expectation. "I should get to work," she said finally. "But truly, Jack, thank you." He nodded, that warm smile reaching his eyes again. "You're welcome, Sarah. Drive safely." As she pulled out of the lot in her new-to-her Toyota, Sarah felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. One problem solved. A small victory in a war that often felt unwinnable. She didn't notice the black SUV parked across the street, or the man inside with a telephoto lens trained on Reynolds Auto. Didn't see the flash as he captured her smile, her car, the sign of the garage. Didn't know that halfway across the country, her ex-husband was about to receive photographic evidence of her new life, her new connection, her moment of unexpected joy. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of routine, but with one significant change. The constant anxiety about her car had been replaced by a reliable Toyota that started every time, that didn't leak or make strange noises, that didn't threaten to strand her and Emma at the worst possible moment. Sarah had texted Jack once to tell him how well the car was running, and again when Emma insisted on sending a photo of Mr. Carrots, all better now, with his bandage removed. Jack had responded with warmth but respect for her boundaries, never pushing for more contact than she initiated. It was refreshing. It was unfamiliar. It was nice. So when the Toyota's windshield wiper fluid ran out during a particularly messy autumn rainstorm, Sarah found herself pulling into Reynolds Auto without hesitation, Emma chattering excitedly in the back seat about seeing Mr. Fix-It again. The garage was busy, all 3 bays occupied with vehicles in various states of repair, Jack and another mechanic moving efficiently between them. When the bell announced their arrival, Jack glanced up, surprise and pleasure crossing his features. "Sarah, Emma," he greeted them, wiping his hands on his ever-present red shop rag. "Everything okay with the Toyota?" "Just needs windshield wiper fluid," Sarah explained. "I should have checked before the rain started." "Easy fix," Jack assured her. "Lily's in the office doing homework if Emma wants to say hi while I top you off." Emma was already heading toward the office. Mr. Carrots clutched in one hand. "She the girl in the pictures?" she asked, pointing to the children's artwork on the walls. "That's her," Jack confirmed. "She's a bit older than you, but I bet she'd love to show you her drawings." As Jack led them toward the office, Sarah caught sight of a slender teenage girl with honey blonde hair, pulled back in a ponytail, bent over what appeared to be math homework. She looked up as they approached, her features arranging themselves into a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Lily, this is Sarah and Emma," Jack introduced them. "Emma's going to keep you company while I help Sarah with her car." Lily nodded, her gaze assessing in that direct way teenagers often have. "Honey," she said, then looked at Emma. "Cool rabbit." Emma immediately launched into the story of Mr. Carrots' operation, and Sarah followed Jack back to her car, glancing over her shoulder at the 2 girls. "Lily seems sweet," she commented as Jack popped the hood of the Toyota. "She has her moments," Jack replied with the wry smile of a parent navigating the treacherous waters of adolescence. 13 is challenging. "I've heard it only gets worse before it gets better," Sarah said, leaning against the workbench as Jack checked the wiper fluid reservoir. "That's what everyone tells me." He reached for a jug of blue fluid. Her mom calls sometimes, which always throws her for a loop. Makes for an interesting few days afterward. The casual mention of his ex made Sarah curious, but she hesitated to pry. Jack seemed to sense her question. "Camille left when Lily was 4. he explained, pouring fluid into the reservoir. Decided family life in a small town wasn't exciting enough. Last I heard, she was in Arizona with husband number 3. I'm sorry, Sarah said softly. Jack shrugged. It was hard at first, but we found our rhythm. Lily's a good kid, even with the occasional teenage drama. He closed the hood and wiped his hands. What about Emma's dad? If you don't mind me asking. The question was casual, without pressure, but Sarah felt herself tense nonetheless. This was the moment where connections either deepened or retreated, where truth either built bridges or burned them. We divorced 2 years ago, she said carefully. It was complicated. Jack nodded, accepting her vague answer without pushing. Divorce usually is. The sound of laughter from the office interrupted them. Emma's high, clear giggle and Lily's deeper chuckle. They both turned toward the sound. Sounds like they're getting along, Jack observed with a smile. Emma makes friends easily, Sarah replied. She's never met a stranger she couldn't charm. Wonder where she gets that from, Jack said, his gaze warm as it met hers. The compliment caught Sarah off guard, heat rising to her cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way, with appreciation unmarred by expectation. All from her father, I'm afraid. Sarah deflected, immediately regretting the reference as curiosity flickered across Jack's features. Before he could respond, the bell above the door rang again, and a harried-looking woman in scrubs entered, keys clutched in her hand. Jack, please tell me you can fit me in, she called. The Subaru's making that noise again, and I've got a double shift tomorrow. Duty calls, Jack said to Sarah with an apologetic smile. The wiper fluid's all set. No charge. Jack, it's literally $5 worth of fluid, Sarah. He interrupted gently. Let me do this small thing. She wanted to argue, to insist on paying, to maintain the careful independence she'd worked so hard to build. But something in his expression stopped her. A genuine desire to help, free of ulterior motives. Thank you, she said instead. You're welcome. His smile deepened. Bring Emma by any time. Lily could use the company. Being an only child with a dad who works all the time isn't always easy. I know that feeling, Sarah admitted. Maybe Emma and I could bring dinner by sometime, as a thank you for all your help. The invitation surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Jack, his eyebrows rising slightly before his expression warmed. We'd like that, he said simply. As Sarah collected Emma and drove away from Reynolds Auto, she felt a strange mixture of anticipation and fear. She was opening a door she'd kept firmly closed since the divorce, letting someone new into the carefully constructed world she'd built for herself and Emma. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the first step on a path she couldn't yet see the end of. What Sarah didn't know, couldn't know, was that 3,000 miles away, in a sleek Malibu home overlooking the Pacific, her ex-husband was flipping through a folder of photographs. Her Toyota, Reynolds Auto, Jack's face as he spoke to her, concern and interest evident even from a distance. Sarah herself, smiling in a way she hadn't in the final years of their marriage. David Taylor's fingers drummed against the glossy surface of his desk. His handsome face, the face that had launched a dozen romantic comedies and action films, set in contemplative lines. So this is where you've been hiding, he murmured to the image of his ex-wife. And this is who you've been hiding with. The private investigator sat silently across from him, waiting for instructions, for payment, for dismissal. In their 15 years of working for the Hollywood elite, they had learned when to speak and when to observe. David closed the folder with a decisive snap. I want everything on this mechanic. Every detail, every skeleton, every unpaid parking ticket. And I want it yesterday. The PI nodded, accepting the check David slid across the desk. No questions asked. That was why they were the best in the business. Why they commanded the fees they did. Discretion was as valuable as information in their line of work. After the investigator left, David moved to the wall of windows overlooking the ocean, the golden afternoon light catching on the waves. His reflection stared back at him. Still handsome at 42, still capable of making women half his age giggle and blush, still bankable despite recent career turbulence. He thought of Sarah, of the simple Toyota she now drove, of the small town she'd retreated to after their divorce, of the mechanic with the easy smile who was fixing more than just her car, if the photographs were any indication. For the first time in months, David felt something stir besides the familiar mix of ambition and ennui that had become his constant companions. Something that tasted suspiciously like regret, like possessiveness, like the realization that what he'd discarded so carelessly might have been worth keeping after all. His phone buzzed with a text from his agent. Spielberg passed. Looking at other options? David didn't bother to respond. Another rejection. Another reminder that his star was no longer ascending. Another reason to reconsider his choices, his priorities, his future. He returned to his desk and opened the folder again, studying the image of Sarah, not the polished, camera-ready woman who had walked red carpets beside him, but this newer version with simpler clothes and a more genuine smile. David Taylor had built a career playing men who realized too late what they had lost. Now, staring at the evidence of Sarah's new life without him, he wondered if art was about to imitate life in ways he'd never anticipated. Back in Riverside, unaware of her ex-husband's scrutiny, Sarah was cooking dinner while Emma sat at the kitchen table, carefully crafting an invitation for Jack and Lily to come for dinner that weekend. The construction paper was adorned with glitter glue and stickers, Emma's careful handwriting spelling out the details with only a few backward letters. "Do you think Mr. Fix-It will like spaghetti?" Emma asked, adding another heart sticker to her creation. "I think he'll like anything we make," Sarah replied, stirring the sauce simmering on the stove. "And remember, his name is Mr. Reynolds." "Lily calls him Dad," Emma pointed out. "Maybe I should call him Mr. Jack." The innocent comment made Sarah pause, wooden spoon suspended above the pot. "You can call him Mr. Reynolds or Jack, sweetie. Either is fine." Emma nodded, returning to her artwork. "I like Lily. She showed me how to draw unicorns with wings, and she said she'll teach me to braid Mr. Carrot's ears next time." Next time. Such simple words, but they carried the weight of continuity, of connection, of a future that included Jack and Lily in their lives. It was both comforting and unsettling. Sarah's phone chimed with a text. Speak of the devil, it was Jack. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about Emma. Thanks for brightening her day. Looking forward to dinner Saturday." Sarah smiled, typing back a quick confirmation before returning to her cooking. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, pinpricks of light in the vast expanse. For the first time in a long while, Sarah allowed herself to feel something like hope, fragile and tentative, but present nonetheless. The dinner invitation had been impulsive, born from gratitude and Emma's obvious delight in Lily's company. But as Saturday approached, Sarah found herself increasingly nervous, cleaning her already tidy apartment with obsessive attention to detail, planning and replanning the menu, wondering if the chipped plates and mismatched glasses would seem shabby to visitors. "It's just dinner," she reminded herself as she changed her outfit for the third time Saturday afternoon. Not a state dinner at the White House. Still, she found herself reaching for the one nice dress she'd kept from her previous life. A simple navy-wrap dress that had survived the purge of designer clothes she'd sold to help finance their move to Riverside. It wasn't fancy by her old standards, but it was a step up from her usual weekend attire of jeans and t-shirts. Emma was equally excited, insisting on wearing her special occasion dress with the tulle skirt and helping to set the table with solemn concentration. "Remember your manners tonight," Sarah reminded her as they arranged a simple centerpiece of autumn leaves Emma had collected from the park. "No talking with your mouth full, and remember to say please and thank you." "I know, Mommy," Emma replied with the slight exasperation of a child who feels unjustly reminded of rules they're well aware of. "I'm not a baby," Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "No, you're not. You're my big girl." The words caught slightly in her throat. Emma was growing so quickly, changing every day in ways both subtle and profound. The baby Emma, the toddler Emma, the preschooler Emma, all gone now, existing only in photographs and memories. The knock at the door came precisely at 6 o'clock. Sarah smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and opened the door to find Jack and Lily standing in the hallway. Jack held a bouquet of mixed fall flowers, while Lily clutched a small gift bag. "Hi," Jack said, his gaze traveling briefly over Sarah's dress before returning to her face with appreciation. "These are for you." "They're beautiful," Sarah replied, accepting the flowers. "Please come in." Lily stepped forward, offering the gift bag to Emma, who had appeared at Sarah's side. "This is for you and Mr. Carrots. Dad helped me pick it out." Emma's face lit up as she peered into the bag, pulling out a small stuffed bear wearing a t-shirt that read Riverside Auto and a miniature tool belt. "Now Mr. Carrots has a friend," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Lily's waist in a spontaneous hug that made the teenager blink in surprise before cautiously returning the embrace. "The bear's name is Wrench," Lily explained as Emma led her toward the living room to introduce the new toy to Mr. Carrots. "Because of the tools and stuff." Jack watched them go with a fond smile before turning back to Sarah. Thanks for inviting us. It's been a while since we've had a home-cooked meal that didn't come from my kitchen. Well, I can't promise gourmet, Sarah warned as she led him into the small kitchen to put the flowers in water. But it should be edible. That's already an improvement on some of my attempts. Jack replied with a self-deprecating chuckle. There's a reason Lily and I know every takeout menu in Riverside by heart. The conversation flowed easily as Sarah finished preparing dinner. Lasagna, garlic bread, and a simple salad. Jack leaned against the counter, offering to help but mostly keeping her company as she worked. There was something comfortable about his presence. A lack of pretense that Sarah found refreshing after years in Hollywood's carefully curated social circles. Your apartment is nice, Jack commented, glancing around at the modest but warm space Sarah had created. Family photos lined the walls, interspersed with Emma's artwork. Bookshelves overflowed with a mix of children's stories and adult fiction. Throw pillows and soft blankets made the hand-me-down furniture look intentionally cozy rather than secondhand. It's small, but it works for us, Sarah replied, sliding the garlic bread into the oven. We were in a smaller place when we first moved here. This feels like a palace in comparison. It feels like a home, Jack said simply. That's what matters. The sincerity in his voice made Sarah pause, wooden spoon in hand. Yes, she agreed softly. That's exactly what matters. Dinner was a success by any measure. Emma and Lily chattered constantly, the age gap between them seeming to disappear as they bonded over shared interests in animals, drawing, and a children's show they both watched despite Lily being too old for it, really, by her own admission. Jack praised the lasagna genuinely enough that Sarah felt a flush of pleasure, and the conversation never lagged or became awkward. It was after dessert, a simple apple crisp that Emma had helped prepare, that the evening took an unexpected turn. The girls had moved back to the living room, where Lily was showing Emma how to create a playground for Mr. Carrots and Wrench using blocks and cardboard. Sarah and Jack remained at the table, coffee cups before them, the remains of dessert pushed aside. Can I ask you something? Jack said, his expression turning more serious than it had been all evening. Sarah nodded, a flicker of apprehension moving through her. This was it. The moment when the other shoe would drop, when the catch would be revealed, when the easy comfort of the evening would dissolve into complication. Why Riverside? Jack asked. It's not exactly a destination town. Most people end up here because they grew up here, or they're passing through to somewhere else. The question was simple enough, but it touched on everything Sarah had been carefully avoiding discussing. Her past, her marriage, her reasons for hiding in this small, unremarkable town. I needed a fresh start, she said after a moment, somewhere quiet, somewhere ... She hesitated, searching for the right words. Somewhere real. Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. And before? Where was home before Riverside? Sarah took a sip of her coffee, buying time. How much to reveal? How much to keep hidden? The line between privacy and dishonesty suddenly seemed blurred. Los Angeles, she said finally. We lived in Los Angeles before the divorce. Understanding dawned in Jack's expression. The entertainment industry? Something like that, Sarah acknowledged. Not quite a confirmation, but not a denial either. Jack seemed to sense her reluctance, changing the subject with a gentle skill that made Sarah increasingly certain he would have made an excellent diplomat in another life. Well, LA's loss is Riverside's gain, he said lightly. And selfishly, I'm glad you ended up here. Otherwise, I'd never have met you and Emma. The simple statement warmed Sarah more than it should have. I'm glad too, she admitted. You've been kind, kinder than I expected anyone to be. You sound like you haven't encountered much kindness lately, Jack observed, his voice soft. Sarah looked down at her coffee cup, tracing its rim with her fingertip. Let's just say the past few years have been an education in who stands by you when things get difficult, and who doesn't. Jack's hand moved across the table, coming to rest beside hers. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. An offering, not a demand. Some people are fair weather friends, he said, and some are built for storms. The metaphor struck Sarah with unexpected force, bringing a sting of tears to her eyes that she blinked away quickly. And which are you, Jack Reynolds? His smile was gentle, his eyes steady on hers. I've weathered my share of storms. They don't scare me anymore. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Sarah wasn't quite ready to name. In the living room, Emma's laughter rang out, followed by Lily's deeper chuckle, the sound pulling both adults back to the present, to the reality of their situation. Two single parents with complicated histories, with responsibilities that came before personal desires, with children whose hearts were as vulnerable as their own. "It's getting late," Jack said, glancing at his watch. "We should probably head out. I've got an early client tomorrow." Sarah nodded, feeling both relief and disappointment as the moment passed. "Of course. Thank you both for coming. It's been really nice." The goodbyes took longer than the greeting, with Emma insisting on showing Lily just one more thing. 3 separate times, and Jack helping Sarah clear the dessert dishes despite her protests. By the time they finally made it to the door, Emma was yawning despite her excitement, the evening's activities catching up with her. "We'll do this again soon," Jack promised as he guided Lily toward the elevator. "Maybe next time at our place. I make a mean barbecue." "We'd like that," Sarah replied, standing in the doorway with Emma leaning sleepily against her side. As the elevator doors closed on Jack and Lily's smiling faces, Sarah felt a curious mixture of emotions: contentment from the evening's success, anxiety about the questions Jack had asked and the ones he hadn't, and a warm, flickering spark of something that felt dangerously like attraction. She closed the apartment door and leaned against it for a moment, eyes closed, trying to sort through the tangle of her feelings. "Mommy?" Emma's voice broke through her thoughts. "I really like Lily and Mr. Jack. Can they be our friends forever?" The innocent question hit Sarah with unexpected force. Forever was a concept she'd grown wary of, a promise she'd learned could be broken as easily as it was made. "We'll see, sweetie," she answered, guiding Emma toward the bathroom to begin their bedtime routine. "For now, let's just enjoy having them as friends today." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer, chattering about Lily and Wrench and the games they'd played as Sarah helped her brush her teeth and change into pajamas. By the time Sarah tucked her into bed, Emma was already drifting off, Mr. Carrots and his new friend Wrench clutched tightly against her chest. Sarah stood in the doorway of Emma's room for a long moment, watching her daughter sleep, wondering what the future held for them, what new connections might form, what old ones might resurface, what storms might still be gathering on their horizon. What she couldn't know was that a storm was indeed brewing, taking shape in the form of a black SUV that would pull up outside Reynolds Auto the following Wednesday, in the form of a handsome, familiar face that would step out of that SUV, designer sunglasses hiding eyes that had once looked at Sarah with love, then indifference, and now with renewed interest, in the form of David Taylor, who had decided that what he had carelessly discarded might be worth reclaiming after all. The week following their dinner with Jack and Lily passed in a pleasant blur for Sarah. Work remained hectic. The holiday season was approaching, bringing with it extended hours at Talbot's and busier shifts at George's. But for the first time in months, the constant weight of anxiety had lifted slightly. Her car ran perfectly. Emma was thriving in school, and the text messages she exchanged with Jack throughout the week brought a smile to her face each time her phone chimed. Nothing flirtatious or presumptuous, just small updates and observations. Jack sending a photo of a spectacular sunset visible from his garage, Sarah sharing Emma's latest art project, Jack asking if Emma and Mr. Carrots were enjoying Wrench's company. Small threads of connection weaving themselves into the fabric of her days. Wednesday afternoon found Sarah at Talbot's, organizing a new display of sweaters, while her mind wandered to the weekend ahead. Jack had invited them to his house for the barbecue he'd promised, and Emma had talked of little else for days. "Sarah, there's someone asking for you." Her manager called from the front desk, breaking into her thoughts. "Says he's a friend." Sarah frowned slightly. She had few friends in Riverside and none who would drop by her workplace unannounced. Setting aside the sweater she'd been folding, she made her way to the front of the store, a polite customer service smile fixed on her face. The smile froze, then crumbled as she recognized the man standing by the checkout counter. Designer sunglasses pushed up on his head, hands casually tucked into the pockets of jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent. David, her ex-husband, here in Riverside, in her store, in the small, separate life she'd so carefully constructed away from him, away from their shared past, away from the pain and humiliation of their very public divorce. "Hello, Sarah," he said, that familiar voice washing over her like a cold wave. "You look well." Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing through possible responses, possible explanations, possible escapes from this moment she'd never prepared for. "What are you doing here?" She finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. David glanced around the store, taking in the modest displays, the bargain racks, the clear distance from the high-end boutiques Sarah had once frequented. "I thought it was time we talked, face to face instead of through lawyers. We have nothing to talk about." Sarah's voice was steadier now, anger providing a foundation that shock had initially undermined. Everything was settled in the divorce. Not everything, David countered, stepping closer, lowering his voice. Emma misses me, and I miss her. The mention of their daughter sent a protective surge through Sarah. Don't, she warned. Don't you dare use Emma as an excuse when you've barely called her in months. When your child support is consistently late. When you've missed birthdays and school events and... I've been working, David interrupted, a flash of the old defensiveness crossing his features before he schooled them back into the charming expression he wore like a second skin. But things are changing. I'm changing, and I want to be part of her life again. A real part. Sarah was acutely aware of her colleagues watching with undisguised curiosity, of customers slowing their browsing to observe the tense exchange. David Taylor might not be immediately recognizable in this small town, especially with his current beard and longer hair for a role, but the intensity of their conversation was drawing attention regardless. This isn't the place, Sarah said, gesturing toward the back of the store. We can talk in the break room. David followed her through the store, his gaze taking in details she wished he couldn't see. The slight wear on her work shoes, the employee name tag pinned to her simple blouse, the practical ponytail that had replaced her once fashionable haircuts. The break room was mercifully empty, the small space containing only a table, a few chairs, a mini fridge, and a microwave that had seen better days. Sarah closed the door behind them, then turned to face her ex-husband, arms crossed protectively over her chest. How did you find me? She demanded. David had the grace to look slightly abashed. I hired someone. After the last child support check bounced, which was an accounting error, by the way, not intentional, I couldn't reach you. Your number had changed. You'd moved. I was worried. Worried, Sarah repeated flatly. After 2 years of minimal contact, suddenly you're worried. I know how it looks, David admitted, running a hand through his hair. A familiar gesture that once would have melted Sarah's resolve. Now it only reminded her of all the times he'd used that same gesture, that same earnest expression, to explain away late nights, suspicious texts, broken promises. It looks like you hired a private investigator to track down your ex-wife and daughter, whom you've shown very little interest in for the past 2 years, Sarah summarized. It looks like an invasion of privacy. It looks like more of the controlling behavior that contributed to our divorce in the first place. David's expression hardened slightly. And what about your new friend? The mechanic? Is he part of your fresh start too? The mention of Jack sent a chill through Sarah. You've been watching me. I've been trying to understand why my ex-wife is living in a town no one's ever heard of, working 2 minimum wage jobs, when the divorce settlement should have set her up comfortably. David countered, I've been trying to understand why my daughter is being raised in a tiny apartment instead of having the advantages we agreed she deserved. The accusation stung, all the more because it touched on Sarah's own private fears, her own moments of doubt about the choices she'd made. The settlement was generous on paper, she acknowledged. But your career hit some bumps, didn't it? The payments became irregular. The promises about Emma's future became theoretical. And I decided I'd rather build something stable and real than count on your inconsistent support. David had the decency to look away, his jaw tightening. Like I said, things are changing. I've got a new project lined up. A good one. The kind that puts careers back on track. I'm happy for you, Sarah said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Despite everything, she didn't wish David ill. She just wished him elsewhere, away from the life she'd rebuilt from the ashes of their marriage. I want to see Emma, David said, his gaze returning to hers. I want to be her father again. A real father, not just a name on child support checks. Sarah studied him, trying to see past the polished exterior, past the practiced sincerity he'd perfected through years of acting. Was this genuine remorse? Actual personal growth? Or was David, as always, simply playing the role he thought would get him what he wanted in the moment? Emma has school until 3, she said finally. I pick her up and take her to Georgia's with me until my shift ends at 10. That's our life now, David. It's not glamorous, but it's consistent. It's stable. She knows what to expect every day. Let me take her for the weekend, David suggested. I've got a suite at the Riverside Inn. We could spend time together, really reconnect. I could bring her back Sunday evening. The thought of Emma spending an entire weekend with the father she barely remembered anymore sent panic coursing through Sarah. Not because she feared for Emma's physical safety, whatever his faults, David had never been abusive, but because she feared for her daughter's emotional well-being. The confusion, the raised expectations, the inevitable disappointment when David's attention wandered again, as it always did. "No," Sarah said firmly. "That's not happening, not yet. You can see her for a few hours, supervised, and we'll see how that goes. If you're serious about being in her life again, you'll need to prove it over time, not in one grand weekend gesture." Frustration flickered across David's handsome features, quickly replaced by a calculating look Sarah recognized all too well. "And if I were to pursue more formal visitation arrangements?" The courts generally favor maintaining relationships with both parents. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between them. Sarah felt her hands begin to tremble and clasped them tightly together to hide the reaction. "Is that really the approach you want to take?" she asked quietly. "Legal threats? After 2 years of minimal involvement? Do you really want the details of our divorce? Your behavior during our marriage? Your inconsistent presence in Emma's life to become part of public court records?" It was a gamble. David's career was built on his image as a likable, trustworthy leading man. A messy public custody battle could damage that image, especially now when he was trying to rebuild his reputation after several professional setbacks. The silence stretched between them, tension crackling in the small break room. "Tomorrow," David said finally. "I'll come by Giorgio's after Emma's school. We can have dinner together, you, me, and Emma. We'll keep it casual, see how she responds." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than an immediate weekend alone with a father Emma barely remembered. And a public meeting at Giorgio's meant witnesses, meant safety, meant boundaries that couldn't easily be crossed. "Fine," Sarah agreed. 5 o'clock. "But David," she fixed him with a steady gaze. "If you disappoint her again, if you make promises you don't keep, if this is just some temporary phase of guilt or boredom on your part, I won't give you another chance to hurt her. I can't." David nodded, his expression unreadable. "I understand. I'll see you both tomorrow." After he left, Sarah sank into one of the break room chairs, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. Her phone chimed with a text. Jack sending a photo of the backyard grill he was cleaning in preparation for their weekend barbecue, with the caption, "Getting ready for Saturday." The simple message, the normal life it represented, brought tears to her eyes. Just when she'd begun to feel safe, to open herself to new possibilities, the past had come roaring back into her life with all its complications and pain. And now she had to tell her daughter that the father who had been largely absent for 2 years was suddenly back, wanting to be part of her life again. She had to prepare Emma for a reunion that might bring joy or heartbreak or some complex emotion in between. She had to figure out what this meant for their carefully constructed new life and for the tentative connections they'd begun to form with Jack and Lily. Sarah brushed away her tears and stood, straightening her clothes and taking deep breaths until she felt composed enough to return to the sales floor. One step at a time, one problem at a time, one day at a time. It was how she'd survived the collapse of her marriage, and it was how she would navigate this new challenge. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that David had one more stop planned in Riverside before returning to his hotel suite. One more piece of reconnaissance to complete his understanding of Sarah's new life. Reynolds Auto was busier than usual when David pulled up in his rented SUV. All 3 service bays were occupied, and Jack was moving between them with the efficient focus of someone who had perfected their craft through years of practice. David observed from his vehicle for several minutes, studying the man who had entered Sarah's life. Jack Reynolds appeared to be in his late 30s, with the solid build of someone who worked with his hands for a living. He moved with confidence around the garage, his interactions with customers friendly but professional. Nothing about him screamed threat or opportunist, which somehow made David even more suspicious. Finally, David stepped out of the SUV and approached the garage, removing his sunglasses as he entered. The smell of oil and metal and rubber assaulted his senses, so different from the carefully scented environments he typically frequented. Jack looked up from the engine he was examining, wiping his hands on a red shop rag as he approached. "Help you with something?" he asked, his expression politely neutral. "I hope so," David replied, extending his hand. "David Taylor, I understand you've been helping my ex-wife with her car." The slight widening of Jack's eyes was the only indication that he recognized the name or made the connection to Sarah. His handshake was firm, neither aggressive nor submissive. A man comfortable in his own skin. "Jack Reynolds," he responded. "And yes, Sarah bought a car from me a few weeks back. Is there a problem with it?" The question was perfectly professional, but David detected the slight protective edge beneath it, the unspoken message. If you're here to cause trouble for Sarah, think again. No problem at all, David assured him. In fact, I wanted to thank you for looking out for her and Emma. It's been a complicated time. Jack nodded, his expression revealing nothing. Sarah's a good customer. Emma's a great kid. No thanks needed. The simplicity of the statement irritated David in ways he couldn't quite articulate. There was no fawning recognition, no attempt to leverage a connection to a Hollywood actor, no obvious agenda. Just a straightforward acknowledgement that left no openings for David to exploit. Still, I appreciate it, David pressed. Sarah's had a rough couple of years. It's good to know she has friends here in Riverside. Jack's gaze remained steady, unimpressed. Was there something you needed help with today? Car trouble. The deliberate pivot back to business was clear. A boundary being drawn, a conversation being steered away from Sarah, and whatever Jack's relationship with her might be. Actually, I was hoping to get your professional opinion, David said, unwilling to be dismissed so easily. I'm considering buying a classic car. Something American, maybe from the 60s or 70s. Any recommendations on models that are worth the investment? It was a transparent attempt to prolong the conversation, to gauge more about the man who had entered Sarah's orbit. But Jack seemed to recognize it for what it was, a fleeting expression of impatience crossing his features before his professional demeanor reasserted itself. Depends on what you're looking for, Jack replied. Investment potential? Something to drive? A project car? For the next 15 minutes, David found himself engaged in a surprisingly detailed conversation about classic cars, restoration challenges, and market values. Jack spoke with genuine knowledge and passion about the subject, answering David's increasingly specific questions with patience and expertise. By the end of the conversation, David had learned exactly nothing about Jack's relationship with Sarah, but had somehow committed to considering a 1967 Mustang Fastback as his next vehicle purchase, with Jack's card in his pocket should he decide to pursue the idea. Thanks for your time, David said as he prepared to leave, frustration simmering beneath his pleasant expression. I'm sure I'll be seeing you around while I'm in town visiting Emma. If the casual mention of his daughter was meant to provoke a reaction, it failed. Jack simply nodded, his expression professionally neutral. Good luck with the car search, he said, and give my best to Sarah and Emma. As David drove away from Reynolds Auto, he found himself unsettled by the encounter. He had expected to find an obvious fortune hunter, a man clearly interested in Sarah for her connection to Hollywood or the possibility of financial gain. Instead, he'd met someone solid, competent, and seemingly genuine, qualities that posed a far greater threat to David's renewed interest in his ex-wife and daughter than any gold digger ever could. Back at her apartment that evening, Sarah sat on the edge of Emma's bed, trying to find the right words to explain David's sudden reappearance in their lives. Sweetie, do you remember when we talked about your daddy and how he lives far away making movies? She began, stroking Emma's hair back from her forehead. Emma nodded, clutching Mr. Carrots close to her chest. He's too busy to visit, but he loves me from far away. The simple explanation, crafted to protect Emma from the more complicated truth of David's sporadic interest, now felt like a lie that would come back to haunt Sarah. Well, your daddy is in town right now, she continued carefully, and he would like to see you tomorrow. We could have dinner with him at Giorgio's after school. Would you like that? Emma's eyes widened, emotions flitting across her face too quickly for Sarah to interpret. Daddy's here? In Riverside? Sarah nodded, watching her daughter closely. Just for a visit. He wanted to surprise you. Will he bring presents? Emma asked, the question so innocent and yet so revealing of how she had come to view her absent father as a source of occasional gifts rather than consistent presence. I don't know, sweetie, Sarah answered honestly. But the important thing is that he wants to spend time with you, to see how big you've grown, to hear about school and your friends. Emma seemed to consider this, her small brow furrowed in thought. Can I bring Mr. Carrots and Wrench to meet him? Of course, Sarah agreed, relieved that the question wasn't more difficult to answer. You can bring them both. And will we still go to Mr. Jack's house on Saturday for barbecue? Emma asked, her priorities clear. He promised to show me Lily's treehouse. The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. In the shock of David's appearance, she hadn't considered how his presence might affect their plans with Jack and Lily. Would David expect to monopolize their weekend? Would he be jealous of Emma's obvious excitement about spending time with Jack? Would he use his parental rights to disrupt the new connections they were forming? Yes, we're still going to Jack's on Saturday, Sarah assured her daughter, making the decision in that moment. David's reappearance didn't give him the right to dictate their plans or their friendships. Nothing has changed about that. Emma nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. I'm going to wear my purple dress to see Daddy, she declared, practical matters decided in her mind. And I'll tell him about Mr. Carrot's operation and how Mr. Jack fixed him. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the resilience of children, their ability to incorporate new developments into their worldview without the anxiety and overthinking that plagued adults. That sounds perfect, she said. Now time for sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. After Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, trying to process the day's events. David's sudden appearance, the implied threat of legal action if she didn't accommodate his renewed interest in Emma's life. The complicated emotions his presence stirred, not love, not anymore, but a mixture of anger, anxiety, and a strange nostalgia for the person she'd believed him to be when they first met. Her phone chimed with a text from Jack. Everything okay? You've been quiet today. The simple message, the genuine concern it conveyed, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. How to explain the tornado that had swept through her carefully constructed life in the span of a few hours? After a moment's hesitation, she typed back, Emma's father is in town. Showed up unexpectedly today. Having dinner with us tomorrow. Jack's response came quickly. That's big news. How are you feeling about it? The question was so direct, so free of judgment or assumption, that Sarah found herself responding with more honesty than she'd intended. Scared, angry, confused. He's been minimally involved for 2 years, and now suddenly he wants to be father of the year. I don't trust it. Trust your instincts, Jack replied. You know him better than anyone, and you're a great mom. You'll make the right calls for Emma. The vote of confidence, simple but sincere, steadied Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. Thank you, she texted back. Still planning on Saturday unless you want to reschedule with all this happening. We're looking forward to it, came Jack's response. Lily's already planning activities for Emma. But if you need to change plans, we understand. No pressure. Sarah set down her phone, a small smile touching her lips despite the turmoil of the day. In the midst of chaos, Jack's steady presence, even through text messages, felt like a rock she could cling to in rough waters. What she didn't know was that across town, in his luxurious hotel suite, David was making plans of his own. Plans that involved extending his stay in Riverside. Plans that involved reconnecting not just with his daughter, but with the woman he had once promised to love forever. Plans that would inevitably collide with the new life Sarah had built and the new connections she had formed. The storm that had been brewing was about to break, and none of them, not Sarah, not Jack, not David, fully understood the changes it would bring to all their lives. Thursday evening arrived with the peculiar slow-motion quality of dreaded events. Sarah had been distracted all day, her mind constantly circling back to the impending dinner with David. Emma, by contrast, had awakened vibrating with excitement, changing her mind 3 times about which dress to wear to school so it would look perfect for seeing her father. By the time they arrived at Giorgio's at 4:45, Sarah felt like her nerves were balanced on a knife's edge. She changed into a simple blue blouse and black pants after her shift at Talbot's. Nothing fancy but presentable enough to armor her for the encounter ahead. Marco, the manager, had given her the night off when she'd explained the situation, his sympathetic expression suggesting he understood more than she'd explicitly stated. Take table 7, he'd said, gesturing to a booth in the corner that offered a measure of privacy while still being visible from the counter. And Sarah, if you need anything at all, you just signal me, okay? The support, unexpected but deeply appreciated, had brought a lump to Sarah's throat. Thank you, she'd managed, grateful for this small kindness in the midst of chaos. Now, as she and Emma settled into the booth, Sarah found herself obsessively straightening the silverware, adjusting the salt and pepper shakers, small nervous movements she couldn't seem to control. Is Daddy late? Emma asked, swinging her feet beneath the table. Mr. Carrots and Wrench positioned carefully beside her. No, sweetie, we're early, Sarah assured her, checking her watch for the 4th time in as many minutes. He'll be here soon. As if summoned by her words, the bell above George's door chimed and David walked in. He was wearing the casual but calculated outfit that Sarah recognized from countless weekend brunches in their married days. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater in a shade of blue that brought out his eyes, loafers that probably cost more than her monthly car payment. His hair was artfully tousled, his beard neatly trimmed. He looked every inch the movie star, and Sarah felt a familiar twist of inadequacy that she immediately resented. Emma had fallen silent, suddenly shy as she took in the father she hadn't seen in nearly a year. David approached the table with a smile that combined confidence and uncertainty in a way only a skilled actor could manage. "There's my girl," he said, his gaze locked on Emma. "Look how big you've gotten." Emma pressed closer to Sarah's side, overwhelmed by the moment, by the handsome stranger who was supposedly her father, by the weight of expectations she couldn't possibly understand. "Say hello to your dad, Emma," Sarah prompted gently, putting a reassuring arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Hello?" Emma whispered, her usual exuberance nowhere in evidence. David slid into the booth across from them, his expression softening as he took in Emma's shyness. "I brought you something," he said, reaching into a small bag Sarah hadn't noticed him carrying. "I thought you might like it." He placed a beautifully wrapped package on the table and pushed it gently toward Emma. She looked up at Sarah, seeking permission. "Go ahead," Sarah encouraged, recognizing that gifts were the language David spoke most fluently when it came to parenting. Emma carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a stuffed elephant dressed in a tutu, its plush gray fabric impossibly soft. "It's beautiful," she breathed, stroking the elephant's head with reverent fingers. "I remember you liked elephants," David said, a note of uncertainty in his voice that Sarah had rarely heard before. "You still do, right?" Emma nodded, still captivated by the gift. "Her name is Ellie," she declared after a moment's consideration. "She can be friends with Mr. Carrots and Wrench." David's gaze shifted to the other stuffed animals lined up beside Emma, his expression flickering with something Sarah couldn't quite interpret. "Who's Wrench?" he asked, his tone carefully casual. "Lily gave him to me," Emma explained, warming up slightly as she moved into familiar territory. "He's a mechanic bear, see?" She held up the small stuffed bear with its tool belt. "He helps fix cars like Mr. Jack does." David's eyes met Sarah's over their daughter's head, a silent communication passing between them. His questioning, hers defensive. "Lily is Jack Reynolds' daughter," Sarah explained, keeping her voice neutral. "They've been kind to us." "I see," David replied, his smile never wavering, though something hardened in his eyes. "Well, maybe Ellie can join their adventures. What do you think, Emma?" The conversation progressed with the awkward starts and stops of people trying to rebuild a connection across a vast gulf of time and experience. David asked about school, about Emma's friends, about her favorite subjects. Emma gradually warmed up, her natural exuberance returning as she told her father about her teacher, her art projects, the class hamster she got to take home for a weekend. Sarah remained mostly silent, watching the interaction with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. Relief that Emma was engaging, anxiety about where this renewed relationship might lead, a strange grief for the family they had never quite managed to be. "And on Saturday we're going to Mr. Jack's house for barbecue," Emma was saying, bouncing slightly in her seat with excitement. "Lily says they have a tree house and a swing set, and I can play with their dog Rusty." David's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "That sounds fun. Maybe on Sunday we could do something special together? Just the three of us? I'm staying through the weekend." The casual announcement that he was extending his stay, that he expected to be included in their plans, sent a jolt of irritation through Sarah. Typical David, assuming his presence would rearrange everyone else's priorities. "We'll have to see," she said carefully. "Emma has a birthday party to attend on Sunday afternoon." It wasn't exactly a lie. One of Emma's classmates was having a party, though they hadn't yet decided if they would attend. "Morning then," David suggested smoothly. "Breakfast and a trip to that park I saw on the edge of town? The one with the duck pond?" Before Sarah could formulate a response that wouldn't sound needlessly hostile, the bell above the door chimed again. Sarah glanced up reflexively and felt her heart stutter as Jack walked in, his gaze sweeping the restaurant until it landed on their table. For a moment he looked uncertain, clearly recognizing David from their encounter at the garage. Then his expression cleared, and he offered a small, supportive smile to Sarah before heading to the counter to place what was obviously a takeout order. David had noticed her reaction, turning to follow her gaze. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he recognized Jack. "Shri, friend of yours?" he asked, though the question was unnecessary given their previous meeting. "Yes," Sarah replied simply, refusing to elaborate or apologize for Jack's presence in what was, after all, a public restaurant. Emma, oblivious to the tension, waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Jack, look what my daddy brought me!" She held up the stuffed elephant proudly. Jack approached their table, his expression warm as he focused on Emma. "That's a beautiful elephant," he said. "Does she have a name?" "Ellie," Emma declared. "She's going to be friends with Mr. Carrots and Wrench." "A whole stuffed animal family," Jack observed with a smile. "Very nice." He glanced at Sarah, a silent question in his eyes. "Are you okay?" She nodded slightly, grateful for his concern and for the way he included Emma so naturally in the conversation. "Jack Reynolds," he said, extending his hand to David with professional courtesy. "We met briefly yesterday." "David Taylor." David replied, his handshake firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Yes, at your garage. Nice to see you again." The moment stretched with awkward tension, two men sizing each other up across an invisible divide, with Sarah and Emma caught in the middle. "Order for Reynolds?" called the cashier, breaking the tableau. "That's me," Jack said, stepping back from the table. "Enjoy your dinner. See you Saturday, Emma." With a final nod to Sarah and David, he collected his takeout and left, the bell chiming softly as the door closed behind him. "Saturday," David repeated once Jack was gone, his tone deceptively casual. "The barbecue." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Yes, Emma and I were invited weeks ago." "And Jack is a friend?" The question hung between them, loaded with implication. "Yes, David, a friend," Sarah confirmed, keeping her voice level despite her rising irritation. "The kind who helps when your car breaks down and you can't afford to fix it. The kind who notices when you're struggling and offers a hand without making you feel small for needing it." The pointed comparison to David's own behavior wasn't lost on him, a muscle working in his jaw as he absorbed the implicit criticism. "I'm just trying to understand what's been happening in my daughter's life while I've been away," he said, his tone reasonable, hurt even. The wounded party rather than the one who had inflicted the wounds. It was a role he played well, both on and off screen. 2 years, David," Sarah reminded him quietly. "You've been away for 2 years. Did you think we just sit in suspended animation, waiting for you to remember we exist?" Emma had grown quiet again, her gaze bouncing between her parents, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand its source. She pulled Ellie closer, along with Mr. Carrots and Wrench, creating a protective circle of stuffed animals around herself. David noticed, his expression softening as he looked at their daughter. "You're right," he conceded, surprising Sarah with the admission. "I've missed too much. That's why I'm here now, to change that. To be part of Emma's life again. Part of both your lives if you'll let me." The sincerity in his voice gave Sarah pause. Was this genuine remorse? Actual personal growth? Or just another performance? Another role designed to get him what he wanted in the moment? "It's not that simple," she said finally. "You can't just walk back into our lives after 2 years and expect everything to rearrange itself around you. Emma has a routine, friends, activities. I have work and responsibilities. We've built a life here. A life where you work 2 jobs just to make ends meet," David pointed out. "A life in a small apartment in a town no one's ever heard of. A life where our daughter doesn't have access to the opportunities we always said we wanted for her." The criticism stung, all the more because it echoed Sarah's own private doubts on her darkest days. Was she doing enough for Emma? Was this small-town existence limiting her daughter's potential? Was the stability she'd prioritize worth the opportunities Emma might be missing? A life with consistency, Sarah countered. With friends who show up. With a mother who's present every day, not just when it's convenient or when guilt strikes. That matters too, David. Emma had begun to fidget, uncomfortable with the tension crackling between her parents, even though they were keeping their voices low and their words civil. "Can we have pizza now?" she asked, her small voice breaking through the charged atmosphere. "I'm hungry." Both adults immediately refocused on their daughter, parental instincts overriding the conflict simmering between them. "Of course, biker sweetie," Sarah said, smoothing Emma's hair. "What kind would you like?" The rest of the dinner passed in a careful dance of politeness, with Emma serving as both buffer and bridge between her parents. David charmed and entertained, drawing out stories from Emma about school and friends, making her giggle with silly faces and jokes. Sarah watched, acknowledging that whatever his faults, David had always been good at making Emma laugh, at creating moments of joy, even if he couldn't sustain the more demanding aspects of parenthood. By the time they finished dessert, a huge ice cream sundae that Emma insisted on sharing with all 3 of her stuffed animals, much to the amusement of nearby diners, a fragile peace had been established. Not resolution, not reconciliation, but a temporary truce for Emma's sake. "I'll walk you both home," David offered as they prepared to leave. Sarah hesitated, reluctant to allow him into the private space of their apartment, the life they'd built without him. "That's not necessary. It's not far. Please, Sarah," David said, his voice low as Emma gathered her toys. "Just to your door. It's getting dark, and I'd feel better knowing you got home safely." The concern seemed genuine, and Sarah found herself nodding despite her reservations. All right, but it's a school night, so we won't be inviting you in. David accepted the boundary with a grace that surprised her. Of course, I understand. The walk to Sarah's apartment was quiet, Emma between them holding both their hands, occasionally skipping a step or swinging their arms. It was a picture of family harmony that felt both familiar and utterly strange. A glimpse of what might have been if things had been different, if David had been different, if their marriage had been built on something more substantial than youth and passion and Hollywood fantasy. At the entrance to her building, Sarah stopped, gently disengaging her hand from Emma's. This is us. Say goodnight to your dad, Emma. Emma looked up at David, shyness returning now that their evening was ending. Good night, Daddy. Thank you for Ellie. David crouched down to her level, his expression more vulnerable than Sarah had seen it all evening. You're welcome, Princess. I'll see you again soon, okay? Maybe Sunday morning like we talked about. Emma nodded, then surprised both adults by stepping forward to give David a quick hug before retreating to Sarah's side. The simple gesture seemed to affect David deeply, a sheen of moisture appearing in his eyes that he quickly blinked away. Good night, Emma, he said, his voice slightly rough. Good night, Sarah. Thank you for tonight. Good night, David, Sarah replied, guiding Emma into the building, feeling David's gaze on them until the door closed behind them. Later, after Emma was asleep, Ellie now joining Mr. Carrots and Wrench in her crowded bed, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, trying to process the emotional complexity of the evening. Her phone chimed with a text from Jack. Hope dinner went okay. Here if you need to talk. The simple message, the undemanding support it offered, brought a lump to Sarah's throat. She typed back, it was complicated, but Emma's okay, and that's what matters. Thank you for checking in. His response came quickly, always. See you both Saturday unless plans change. We'll be there, Sarah confirmed, making the decision definitively. Whatever David's reappearance meant for their future, she wouldn't allow it to disrupt the healthy connections she and Emma had begun to form. Emma's looking forward to it. So am I. Across town in his hotel suite, David sat with a glass of whiskey, scrolling through the photos he'd taken at dinner. Emma smiling, Emma laughing, Emma with her stuffed animals. His daughter growing up without him, forming attachments to strangers like Jack Reynolds. Building a life in which David was increasingly peripheral. The realization stung more than he'd expected. When had Emma become this person? This actual human being with opinions and preferences, and a life that continued in his absence? When had Sarah transformed from his glamorous, somewhat intimidated young wife into this confident, fiercely protective mother who challenged him without hesitation? And what did he really want from them now? To reclaim what he'd lost? To assuage his guilt? To fill the growing emptiness in his own life as his career faltered and his relationships remained shallow and transient? David didn't have answers to these questions, only a growing certainty that he couldn't simply walk away again. That something important was happening in Riverside, something that involved his daughter, his ex-wife, and a mechanic named Jack Reynolds. Something that David, for reasons he wasn't quite ready to examine, felt compelled to be part of. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect autumn day that seemed designed for backyard barbecues and new beginnings. Sarah had barely seen David since their dinner Thursday night. Just a brief conversation when he'd called Friday evening to speak to Emma, to tell her about the ducks he'd seen at the park, to confirm their tentative plans for Sunday morning. Emma had chattered happily with her father, clearly warming to his renewed presence in her life, though she still referred to him as Daddy, with a slight questioning tone, as if testing the words fit in her mouth after so long disuse. Now, as Sarah helped Emma get ready for their day at Jack's, she found herself unusually conscious of her appearance, changing her outfit twice before settling on jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Are you nervous, Mommy? Emma asked, watching Sarah apply a light coat of mascara, a cosmetic indulgence she rarely bothered with these days. No, sweetie, Sarah replied automatically, then reconsidered. Well, maybe a little. It's always a bit nervous-making to visit someone's home for the first time. Emma nodded sagely. Like the first day of school. But Mr. Jack is nice, so we don't need to be scared. The simple wisdom made Sarah smile. You're right. And we're bringing that apple cake you helped make, so we're being nice back. The Toyota started immediately when Sarah turned the key. A small but significant victory that still brought a surge of gratitude every time. As they drove through Riverside toward Jack's address, Sarah found herself noticing details of the town she'd been too stressed to appreciate before. The way the maple trees along Main Street had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, the cheerful Halloween decorations appearing in shop windows, the easy pace of Saturday morning shoppers strolling the sidewalks. Jack's house was on the outskirts of town, a modest two-story with white siding and black shutters, set back from the road with a large oak tree dominating the front yard. A basketball hoop hung above the garage door, and bright chrysanthemums lined the walkway to the porch. It looked exactly like what it was, a family home, well-maintained and loved. As Sarah parked in the driveway behind Jack's truck, the front door opened and Lily emerged, followed by a medium-sized golden-brown dog who bounded down the steps with enthusiasm. "That's Rusty," Emma exclaimed, already unbuckling her seatbelt with unusual speed. "Lily told me about him. Wait for me before you pet him," Sarah cautioned, gathering the apple cake from the back seat. "We need to make sure he's friendly with strangers." "He's super friendly," Lily assured them as they approached, one hand on the dog's collar, though he was straining toward them with a wildly wagging tail. "Just enthusiastic. Down, Rusty." The dog immediately sat, though his entire body vibrated with the effort of containing his excitement. Emma approached carefully, holding out her hand as Sarah had taught her to do with unfamiliar animals. "He can smell the cake," Lily explained with a laugh as Rusty sniffed Emma's hand, then gave it a gentle lick that sent Emma into giggles. "Dad's out back getting the grill ready. I'm supposed to bring you through the house." The interior of Jack's home was comfortable and lived in, with a mixture of practical furniture and personal touches that spoke of a real life being lived rather than a space designed to impress. Family photos lined the walls of the entryway. Jack and Lily at various ages, an older couple Sarah assumed were Jack's parents, a young Jack in a high school football uniform. "Your home is lovely," Sarah commented as Lily led them through to the kitchen, a bright space with well-used appliances and a large wooden table that bore the marks of many family meals. "Dad's pretty good at fixing things up," Lily replied with casual pride. "He redid the kitchen last year, and my bedroom, and built the treehouse." "Is that the famous treehouse?" Sarah asked, looking through the kitchen window to the backyard where a substantial wooden structure was visible, nestled in the branches of a large maple tree. Lily nodded. "Dad built it when I was 8. It's pretty cool, has electricity and everything." The obvious affection in Lily's voice when she spoke about her father touched Sarah deeply. For all the complications of being a single parent, Jack had clearly created a secure, loving environment for his daughter, exactly what Sarah was striving to provide for Emma. Jack appeared in the doorway from the backyard, a spatula in one hand and a smile on his face that widened when he saw them. "You made it. Welcome to Casa Reynolds. We brought cake," Emma announced, pointing to the container in Sarah's hands. "I helped make it." "Perfect," Jack said. "I love cake almost as much as I love having company for barbecue. Come on out, everything's almost ready." The backyard was as welcoming as the house itself, a wooden deck with a large table and chairs, a well-used grill now emitting delicious smells, and a sprawling lawn that led to the treehouse. A tire swing hung from another tree, and flower beds lined the fence separating the property from its neighbors. "This is wonderful," Sarah said, setting the cake on the outdoor table. "Emma, look at that tire swing." But Emma was already being led toward the treehouse by Lily, Rusty bounding alongside them, all three seemingly instant friends united by the adventure ahead. "Lily's been talking about showing Emma the treehouse all week," Jack commented as he returned to the grill. "It's nice to see her excited about something. The teenage years can be challenging." "So I've heard," Sarah replied with a smile. "Though Emma gives me plenty of challenges at 6, so I'm not sure I'm looking forward to 13. Jack chuckled. "Fair point. How are you doing with everything?" "With Emma's dad being in town, I mean." The direct question, asked with genuine concern rather than prying curiosity, made it easy for Sarah to answer honestly. "It's complicated. He says he wants to be more involved in Emma's life again, and I want to believe that's true for her sake. But you're worried it won't last," Jack finished when she trailed off. "That he'll disappoint her again," Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Exactly. And I'm not sure what his reappearance means for our life here. For the routines and stability we've built." Jack flipped a burger, his expression thoughtful. "Change is always challenging, especially when it's not change you chose. But from what I've seen, you're a rock for Emma. Whatever happens with her dad, she has you. Consistent, loving, present. That counts for a lot. The simple validation, offered without judgment or platitudes, eased something tight in Sarah's chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough, giving her enough." "Every good parent wonders that," Jack assured her. "I question my parenting decisions at least 3 times a day. But you know what? Lily's turning out okay despite my mistakes. Kids are resilient when they know they're loved." The sound of laughter from the treehouse drew their attention. Emma and Lily, visible through the small window, clearly engaged in some elaborate game involving Emma's stuffed animals, who had all made the trip to Jack's house for the occasion. "She seems to be adjusting to the idea of having her dad around again," Sarah observed. "She was so excited to show him her new stuffed elephant last night." "Kids are good at accepting what is," Jack replied. "It's us adults who struggle with the whys and what-ifs." The simple wisdom of his statement struck Sarah forcefully. How much energy had she expended worrying about David's motives, about the future, about potential complications? Meanwhile, Emma had simply incorporated her father's return into her reality with the adaptability of childhood. "You're pretty wise for a mechanic," Sarah teased, the light-hearted comment masking the depth of her appreciation for his insight. Jack grinned, closing the grill lid. "All those hours under cars, staring up at undercarriages, gives a man time to think deep thoughts." The easy banter, the comfort of Jack's presence, the joyful sounds of their daughters playing, it all combined to create a sense of rightness that Sarah hadn't experienced in years. Not the artificial perfection of her Hollywood life with David, but something authentic and warm and real. The afternoon unfolded with the relaxed rhythm of good company and simple pleasures. They ate burgers and corn on the cob at the picnic table, Jack entertaining them with stories of the strangest car problems he'd encountered. Lily sharing highlights from her recent school field trip. Emma describing in elaborate detail the adventure her stuffed animals were having in the treehouse. After lunch, Jack gave them a tour of his workshop in the garage, a smaller, neater version of his professional space, where he restored classic car parts as a hobby. Sarah found herself genuinely interested in his explanations of the restoration process, the patience and skill required to bring old, damaged things back to their original beauty. "It's like giving something a second chance," she commented as he showed her a door handle he'd painstakingly restored for a 1965 Mustang. Seeing the potential under the damage, Jack's gaze met hers, something warm and understanding passing between them. "Exactly. Everything deserves a chance to be whole again, to be useful, to be appreciated for what it is, rather than discarded because it's not perfect." The metaphor wasn't lost on Sarah, its application to lives as well as objects clear in Jack's gentle expression. She felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, connection, and something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. The moment was interrupted by Emma's excited voice calling from the backyard. "Mommy, come see the fort we made." The rest of the afternoon passed in a pleasant blur of activities, Jack pushing Emma on the tire swing until she shrieked with laughter, Sarah helping Lily set up a tent on the lawn that became an extension of the stuffed animals' adventure. All 4 of them playing an impromptu game of badminton with a set Jack unearthed from the garage. It was during a quiet moment, as Jack and Lily went inside to bring out the apple cake and ice cream for dessert, that Sarah's phone chimed with a text from David, confirming our plans for tomorrow morning. "Thought we could have breakfast at the diner on Main, then visit that duck pond. How does 9 a.m. sound?" The message was reasonable, the plans appropriate for a father spending time with his daughter. But it created a jarring note in the harmonious day, a reminder of the complicated reality waiting beyond this peaceful afternoon. Sarah texted back a simple confirmation, then slipped her phone back into her pocket as Jack and Lily returned with dessert. If Jack noticed her momentary distraction, he didn't comment, instead serving generous portions of apple cake and vanilla ice cream with the focused attention he seemed to bring to every task. As the afternoon began to shade into evening, a comfortable tiredness settled over the group. Emma was yawning despite her protests that she wasn't sleepy at all, and even Rusty had curled up under the picnic table for a nap. "We should probably head home soon," Sarah said reluctantly as they finished their dessert. "Emma has plans with her dad tomorrow morning, and she needs a good night's sleep." Jack nodded, understanding in his expression. "Of course, but this was great. We'd love to have you both over again sometime." "Can we, Mommy?" Emma asked through a yawn. "I want to play with Rusty and Lily again." "Definitely," Sarah assured her, catching Jack's smile over Emma's head. "Maybe we can have Jack and Lily over to our place next time." "It's a date," Jack said, then flushed slightly at his choice of words. "I mean a plan. It's a plan." The slight slip, the momentary vulnerability it revealed, endeared him to Sarah even more. This man who could rebuild engines and construct treehouses was nervous about the implication of the word date. It was sweet. Goodbyes took longer than expected, with Emma insisting on showing Sarah one more feature of the treehouse, and Lily helping gather the stuffed animals who had been scattered during their adventure. By the time they were finally in the car, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across Jack's front yard. "Did you have fun today?" Sarah asked as they drove home, glancing in the rearview mirror at Emma, who was already half asleep in her booster seat. "The most fun," Emma mumbled, her eyes heavy. "Mr. Jack makes good burgers, and Lily showed me how to make leaf crowns, and Rusty let me rub his belly." "It was a good day," Sarah agreed, a sense of contentment settling over her despite the uncertainty that David's return had introduced into their lives. What she didn't know, couldn't have known, was that David's black SUV had driven past Jack's house twice that afternoon. That he had seen the Toyota in the driveway, had glimpsed the four of them playing badminton in the backyard, had observed the easy familiarity, the laughter, the connection that was forming between the two families. That he had felt a complex surge of emotions at the sight: jealousy, regret, determination. Emotions that would shape his actions in the days to come. Actions that would force Sarah to confront not just her past with David, but her possible future with Jack. As she tucked Emma into bed that night, surrounded by her growing collection of stuffed animals, Sarah found herself thinking about Jack's words from earlier. Everything deserves a chance to be whole again, to be useful, to be appreciated for what it is, rather than discarded because it's not perfect. Was that true for people as well as objects? For relationships? For families broken and possibly remade? Was David deserving of that second chance? Was she herself ready to risk being whole again, with all the vulnerability that entailed? Sarah didn't have answers to these questions, only the certainty that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities for both healing and heartbreak. For now, she allowed herself to hold on to the warmth of the day, the laughter, the connection, the simple joy of being seen and appreciated exactly as she was. Across town, in his hotel suite, David sat at his laptop, reviewing the information his private investigator had compiled about Jack Reynolds. Solid citizen, no criminal record, well-respected business owner, volunteer coach for the local youth basketball league, single father raising a teenage daughter after his wife left 8 years ago. Nothing suspicious, nothing exploitable, nothing that explained why David felt such unease, such threat from this unassuming mechanic who had entered Sarah and Emma's lives. Nothing except the simple truth David wasn't ready to acknowledge: that Jack Reynolds offered Sarah and Emma exactly what David never had: consistency, genuine caring, presence without performance. And that this, more than anything, was what made him so dangerous to David's renewed interest in the family he had once so carelessly discarded. Tomorrow's breakfast suddenly seemed more significant than a simple meal with his daughter. It was the opening move in a game David wasn't entirely sure how to play. A game where the stakes were higher than any film role, any career opportunity, any Hollywood accolade. A game where, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, David Taylor wasn't certain of the ending he wanted, only that he couldn't bear to be written out of the story entirely. Sunday morning arrived with a light drizzle that turned the fallen leaves on the sidewalk into a slippery, colorful carpet. Sarah helped Emma dress for her breakfast with David, trying to project a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Remember to use your napkin," she reminded Emma as they prepared to leave. "And it's okay to order whatever you want for breakfast. Daddy won't mind." "Can Mr. Carrots come too?" Emma asked, already reaching for her stuffed rabbit. "And Ellie and Wrench?" Sarah hesitated, torn between wanting Emma to have her comfort objects and worrying about David's reaction to Wrench in particular. The tangible reminder of Jack's place in Emma's affections. "How about just Ellie today?" she suggested gently. "Since she's the newest and might need to spend more time with you and Daddy." Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, Mr. Carrots and Wrench can guard the house." The diner was busy with the Sunday morning crowd when they arrived, but David had secured a booth by the window and waved them over, rising to greet them with a warm smile. "There's my girls," he said, helping Emma out of her rain jacket. "I was worried the weather might keep you away." "It's just a little rain," Sarah replied, sliding into the booth opposite him. Emma was excited about seeing the ducks. "And we can still go," David assured Emma. "I brought umbrellas. Ducks like the rain anyway. They're already waterproof." Emma giggled at this. immediately launching into a story about a book she had about animals and their special adaptations. David listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions and seeming impressed by her knowledge. Watching them interact, Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. There was the undeniable warmth of seeing her daughter connect with her father, the hope that this time David's interest might be sustainable. But there was also wariness, the protective instinct that had been honed through 2 years of being Emma's primary defender against disappointment and hurt. Sarah? David's voice broke through her thoughts. What do you think? She blinked, realizing she'd missed part of the conversation. I'm sorry, what? I was just telling Emma that I'm going to be in Riverside for a few more weeks. David explained. I rented a small house near the park. I thought it would be nice to have some space where Emma could visit, maybe even have her own room for when she stays over. The casual announcement landed like a bombshell. A few more weeks, a rented house, overnight visits. David was clearly planning a much longer stay, a much deeper involvement in their lives than Sarah had anticipated. That's quite a commitment. She managed keeping her voice even for Emma's sake, though her mind was racing. I thought you were just here for a short visit. David's expression was earnest, open. I've realized how much I've missed, how much I've been missing out on with Emma. I want to change that. I've arranged to take some time off between projects to really focus on rebuilding our relationship. What about your work? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. David's career had always been his priority, his scheduling inflexible, his commitments to films taking precedence over family obligations. A shadow crossed his handsome features. Let's just say Hollywood can wait. Some things are more important. The sentiment was exactly what Sarah had longed to hear during their marriage. The prioritization of family over fame that she had repeatedly asked for and never received. To hear it now, after everything that had happened, left her disoriented and suspicious. I see, she said finally, unwilling to challenge him directly in front of Emma. Well, we can talk more about what this means for Emma's schedule later. David nodded, accepting the deflection with good grace. Of course. For now, let's just enjoy our breakfast. Emma, I hear the pancakes here are amazing. Want to try them? The meal progressed pleasantly enough, with Emma chattering happily about school, about Lily and Rusty, about the tree house and the tire swing. David listened attentively, asking questions, drawing her out, displaying a patience with child conversation that Sarah couldn't remember seeing during their marriage. People had begun to notice them, or more specifically, to notice David. Riverside might be a small town off the beaten path, but David Taylor was still recognizable, his face familiar from dozens of films and countless magazine covers. Whispers started at nearby tables, surreptitious glances thrown their way, a few diners finding excuses to walk past their booth for a closer look. David seemed oblivious to the attention, or perhaps he was simply so accustomed to it that it no longer registered. Sarah, however, felt increasingly uncomfortable. This was precisely what she had sought to avoid by settling in Riverside. The public scrutiny, the loss of privacy, the transformation of ordinary moments into spectacles. Are you famous? Emma asked suddenly, her perceptive gaze catching the stares directed their way. People keep looking at you. David smiled, reaching across the table to gently tap her nose. I'm an actor, remember? Sometimes people recognize me from movies or TV shows. Emma considered this. Like when my friend Zoe saw her piano teacher at the grocery store and got all excited. Sarah couldn't help but smile at the comparison, at Emma's grounding of celebrity into her 6-year-old framework of the world. Exactly like that. David agreed, his expression softening as he looked at their daughter. But I'm not famous for anything important. Not like being your dad. That's my most important job. The sincerity in his voice gave Sarah pause. Was this genuine? Had David's priorities truly shifted? Or was this another role, another performance designed to achieve some goals she couldn't yet discern? After breakfast, they made their way to the park, huddled under the umbrellas David had brought. The rain had lightened to a gentle mist, wreathing the trees in a silver haze that gave the park an enchanted quality. The duck pond was busy despite the weather, the resident mallards and geese paddling hopefully toward anyone who might have brought bread. David had come prepared with a paper bag of torn bread crusts, showing Emma how to toss small pieces toward the water's edge. Her delighted giggles as the ducks quacked and jostled for position echoed across the pond, drawing smiles from other park visitors. Standing slightly apart, watching father and daughter feed the ducks, Sarah felt an unexpected twist of emotion. This was what she had wanted for Emma, a father who showed up, who engaged, who created memories and connections. But it was coming years too late, after she had adjusted to being both mother and father, after she had built a life that didn't include David. And now he wanted back in, wanted to establish himself not just as a visitor, but as a resident of Riverside, as a regular presence in Emma's life. The implications were dizzying: shared custody arrangements, co-parenting decisions, the constant negotiation of boundaries and schedules. The loss of the autonomy Sarah had fought so hard to establish after the divorce. "Mom, look," Emma called, breaking into Sarah's thoughts. "The baby ducks are following me." Sarah moved closer, watching as a family of ducklings trailed after Emma along the pond's edge, hoping for more bread. David stood nearby, his expression tender as he observed their daughter, his camera phone raised to capture the moment. "She's amazing," he said quietly as Sarah reached his side. "So smart, so full of life. You've done an incredible job with her, Sarah." The compliment, unexpected and seemingly sincere, caught Sarah off guard. "Thank you," she replied. "She makes it easy to be a good parent. Most of the time, anyway." David chuckled. "I'm sure she has her moments. All kids do." His expression grew more serious. "Look, I know my showing up like this, talking about staying longer. It's a lot to process. But I want you to know my intentions are good. I really do want to be part of Emma's life again, a consistent part." Sarah studied him, trying to see past the practiced sincerity to the truth beneath. "Why now, David? What's changed?" He was silent for a moment, watching Emma crouch down to get a closer look at the ducklings. "I've had some perspective shifts lately. My last film tanked. The new Spielberg project fell through. My agent's talking about her branding me, whatever that means." He shook his head. "And in the middle of all that career chaos, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt genuinely happy. Then I saw those photos of you and Emma, and I knew what I'd thrown away." The confession seemed raw, honest in a way David rarely was. But Sarah had been fooled before by his apparent vulnerability, his emotional performances that convinced precisely because they contained kernels of truth wrapped in layers of calculation. "I want to believe you," she said finally. "For Emma's sake, I want to believe this is real and lasting. But you've hurt her before, hurt us both, and I can't just..." She trailed off, searching for the right words. "Trust me again," David finished for her. "I know. I don't expect that. I just want a chance to show you both that I've changed. That I can be the father Emma deserves. Maybe even the friend you might need." Friend. The word hung between them, loaded with implication. Not husband, not lover, not partner. Those bridges had been thoroughly burned. But friend, was that possible after everything that had happened? Before Sarah could respond, Emma came running back to them, cheeks flushed with excitement. "The ducks ate all our bread. Can we get more?" "I think they've had enough for today," David replied, kneeling to her level. "But we can come back another day with more bread. Would you like that?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Can we come tomorrow?" David glanced at Sarah, clearly deferring to her judgment. "That depends on your mom's schedule. I know you both have busy lives." The consideration, the acknowledgement of Sarah's authority in Emma's life was new. Another piece of evidence that perhaps David had indeed changed, had learned something from his failures as a husband and father. "We'll see," Sarah said, the non-committal parent answer that had become her default when uncertain. "Monday is a school day and I have work. Maybe after school?" Emma suggested, undeterred. "Please, Mommy?" Sarah found herself caught between her daughter's hopeful expression and her own protective instincts. "We'll talk about it later, sweetie. Right now, let's get you home and into dry clothes. You're getting chilly." As they walked back toward the park entrance, Emma between them holding both their hands as she had that first evening, Sarah felt the weight of decisions hovering on the horizon. How much access to grant David, how to protect Emma while supporting her relationship with her father, how to navigate this unexpected turn in their carefully constructed life. And beneath these practical concerns, a deeper question lurked. What did David's return mean for the tentative connections she had begun to form with Jack? The possibility of something new and genuine that had been growing between them? The sense of belonging she had felt yesterday in his backyard, watching their daughters play, sharing simple food and conversation that required no performance, no calculation? These questions had no immediate answers, only the certainty that the coming weeks would bring changes Sarah hadn't anticipated when she'd moved to Riverside seeking stability and anonymity. That the careful boundaries she had established between her past and her present were blurring, creating a future filled with both possibility and peril. As they reached Sarah's Toyota, parked near the park entrance, David placed a gentle hand on her arm. Think about what I said? About giving me a chance to prove I've changed? Sarah met his gaze, seeing both the charm that had once captivated her and the new undertones of humility that gave her pause. I'll think about it, she promised. But David, Emma comes first, always. Her well-being, her emotional security, that's non-negotiable. As it should be, David agreed, helping Emma into her booster seat. I wouldn't want it any other way. Driving home, watching Emma in the rearview mirror as she chattered excitedly about the Ducks and her breakfast with Daddy, Sarah found herself torn between hope and wariness, between the desire to believe in second chances and the hard-earned wisdom of experience. What she couldn't know was that across town, Jack Reynolds was thinking of her too, wondering about her morning with David, hoping for her happiness while acknowledging the complicated feelings her ex-husband's return had stirred in him. Feelings he had no right to express, no claim to act upon, given the newness of their connection and the priority of their children's well-being. That both men, in their different ways, were contemplating a future that included Sarah and Emma, and that Sarah herself stood at a crossroads, her past and potential future converging in ways she had never anticipated when she first arrived in Riverside, seeking nothing more complicated than peace and stability for herself and her daughter. The following weeks unfolded in a pattern both structured and unpredictable. David settled into the small house he'd rented near the park, establishing a routine of picking Emma up from school 2 afternoons a week and having dinner with her every Sunday. He was punctual, reliable, genuinely engaged with Emma's interests and activities, all the things he had not been during their marriage. Sarah watched this transformation with cautious optimism, grateful for Emma's growing comfort with her father while maintaining a protective distance herself. She coordinated schedules, ensured consistent bedtimes and homework completion, facilitated the developing relationship between father and daughter while keeping her own interactions with David cordial but bounded. And through it all, her connection with Jack continued to deepen, though with a new undercurrent of complication. They texted daily, shared dinner at each other's homes once a week, created opportunities for Emma and Lily to spend time together. Jack never pressed for more than Sarah offered, never expressed jealousy about David's reappearance, never made her feel she had to choose between her past and her possible future. It was a delicate balance, this new life with its intersecting relationships and obligations. But for the first time in years, Sarah found herself surrounded by people who seemed to genuinely care about her and Emma's well-being. David with his newfound commitment to fatherhood, Jack with his steady, undemanding support, even Marco at Georgia's and her manager at Talbot's, who adjusted her schedule to accommodate the new complexities of co-parenting. The shifting dynamic came to a head on a crisp November evening, 3 weeks after David's arrival in Riverside. Emma had a school play, a simple Thanksgiving pageant where she played a particularly enthusiastic turkey, and both David and Jack had been invited to attend. David because he was Emma's father and had been participating in school pickup twice a week, becoming a familiar figure to Emma's teacher and classmates. Jack because he and Lily had been helping Emma practice her 3 lines for days, with Lily designing a special feathered headband for Emma's costume. Sarah hadn't intended to create an awkward situation. The invitation to Jack had been extended before David's arrival, and she had seen no reason to rescind it once David was in the picture. Emma wanted both her daddy and her Mr. Jack to see her performance, and Sarah was determined to prioritize her daughter's wishes over adult complications. But as she saved seats in the elementary school auditorium, 4 in a row for herself, David, Jack, and Lily, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of anxiety about the evening ahead. The 2 men had encountered each other briefly several times over the past weeks, always cordial but with an underlying tension that Sarah could feel even when nothing overt was said or done. "Is this seat taken?" David's voice broke into her thoughts, and Sarah looked up to see him standing in the aisle, handsome in dark jeans and a blue button-down that brought out his eyes, a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. "I saved spots for everyone," Sarah replied, gesturing to the empty chairs beside her. "The flowers are lovely. Emma will be thrilled." "That was the idea," David said with a smile, settling into the seat next to her. "How's she doing? Nervous?" "Excited more than nervous," Sarah answered. "She's been practicing her lines nonstop. Even in her sleep, I think." David chuckled, his expression softening in the way it always did when they discussed Emma. "She gets that from you, you know. That focus, that determination to get things right. I always admired that about you." The compliment, unexpected and seemingly sincere, caught Sarah off guard. Before she could formulate a response, she spotted Jack and Lily making their way down the aisle toward them, Lily carrying what appeared to be another small bouquet. "Great minds," Jack said with a rueful smile as he noticed the flowers David had brought. "We thought Emma might like something special for her big debut. She'll love having 2 bouquets," Sarah assured him, genuinely touched by both men's thoughtfulness. "Thank you both." Jack and Lily took the remaining saved seats, Lily immediately launching into a story about her own disastrous elementary school performance as a snowflake, while Jack listened with fond exasperation, occasionally correcting details that Lily insisted she was remembering perfectly. The easy banter between father and daughter, the obvious affection and comfort they shared, created a pang of something like longing in Sarah's chest. This was what she wanted for Emma, this comfortable certainty of being loved, being known, being accepted exactly as she was. David seemed to be watching the interaction as well, his expression contemplative as he observed Jack and Lily. When the lights dimmed to signal the start of the performance, he leaned slightly toward Sarah. "He seems like a good father," he murmured, the observation surprising in its lack of jealousy or defensiveness. "He is," Sarah confirmed simply. The pageant itself was exactly what one would expect from a production starring 6-year-olds. Endearingly chaotic, with forgotten lines, costume malfunctions, and moments of unexpected hilarity. Emma performed her turkey role with enthusiasm, if not precision, her specially designed headband slightly askew, but her 3 lines delivered with perfect clarity and dramatic emphasis. From her seat in the audience, Sarah watched her daughter with a heart so full it felt like it might overflow. Emma was thriving despite the complications of their life, despite the sudden reappearance of her father, despite the modest circumstances of their Riverside existence compared to the privileged life they'd left behind in Los Angeles. As the final song concluded and the audience erupted in applause, Sarah glanced to either side of her, at David with his movie star good looks and newfound humility, at Jack with his steady presence and genuine warmth. 2 very different men who had entered her life at different points, who represented different possibilities, different futures. Backstage after the performance, Emma was glowing with excitement, bouncing between David and Jack with equal enthusiasm, showing off her costume and headband, accepting their praise and flowers with beaming delight. "2 bouquets," she exclaimed. "One from Daddy and one from Mr. Jack and Lily. I'm like a real actress." The adults exchanged amused glances over her head, momentarily united in their appreciation of Emma's joy. "A star is born," David declared, crouching down to Emma's level. "You were magnificent, sweetheart. The best turkey I've ever seen." "The very best," Jack agreed, Lily nodding beside him. "Especially with that awesome headband Lily made." Emma reached up to touch the feathered creation, her expression solemn. "It's the most beautiful turkey headband in the whole world. Can I keep it forever?" "Of course," Lily assured her. "I made it special for you." The simple exchange, the genuine connection between the girls despite their age difference, warmed Sarah's heart. Whatever complications existed among the adults, Emma and Lily had formed a bond that seemed untouched by the potential awkwardness of the situation. "We should celebrate," David suggested as they prepared to leave the school. "How about ice cream?" "My treat." Emma's eyes widened at the prospect. "Can we, Mommy? Please? With sprinkles?" Sarah hesitated, glancing at Jack and Lily. The invitation hadn't explicitly included them, but excluding them now would be obvious and potentially hurtful to both Emma and Lily. David seemed to realize the omission at the same moment. "All of us, of course," he clarified, his gaze meeting Jack's with what appeared to be genuine openness. "If you and Lily are free?" The invitation surprised Jack, his eyebrows rising slightly before his expression cleared. "We wouldn't want to intrude on family time." "You wouldn't be," David assured him, a new note in his voice that Sarah couldn't quite interpret. "Emma clearly considers you and Lily important people in her life, and any friend of Emma and Sarah's is someone I'd like to know better." The sentiment seemed sincere, free of the calculation or competition Sarah might have expected. Jack studied David for a moment, then nodded, his decision apparently influenced by the hopeful expressions on both girls' faces. "Ice cream sounds great," he agreed. "Lily's always up for sprinkles, aren't you, kiddo?" Lily rolled her eyes at the childish designation, but nodded with a small smile. "Sprinkles are acceptable at any age, Dad." The ice cream shop on Main Street was busy but not crowded, the November chill having reduced the usual line to a manageable few customers. They secured a table by the window, the girls sitting together on one side, the 3 adults somewhat awkwardly arranged on the other. David insisted on ordering for everyone, returning with an elaborate tray of ice cream creations that made Emma and Lily gasp with delight. Conversation flowed more easily than Sarah had anticipated, centered initially on the school performance and then branching into safer territories. Local Riverside events, the upcoming holiday season, Emma and Lily's shared interest in art and animals. Watching the interaction, Sarah felt a curious sense of worlds colliding, but not necessarily clashing. David, when not performing or calculating, could be genuinely charming, his stories engaging, his attention to others sincere. Jack, always steady and authentic, matched David's conversational energy without competing with it, his dry humor and thoughtful observations creating a counterpoint rather than a conflict. It was when the conversation turned to cars, David mentioning his interest in classic models, Jack sharing details about a restoration project he was working on, that Sarah realized something unexpected was happening. The two men were finding common ground, connecting over shared interests despite their vastly different backgrounds and lifestyles. "You should stop by the garage sometime," Jack offered as they finished their ice cream. "I've got a '67 Mustang frame I'm working on. Nothing much to look at yet, but the engine's coming along nicely." "I'd like that," David replied, and to Sarah's surprise, he seemed to mean it. "I was serious about investing in a classic. More as a hobby than anything else, but I'd appreciate expert advice." Plans were made for David to visit Reynolds Auto the following week. The arrangement casual but definite. As they prepared to leave the ice cream shop, Emma yawning despite her sugar intake, Sarah found herself bemused by the turn the evening had taken. "That was unexpected," she commented to Jack as they stood outside, David having stepped away to answer a call from his agent. Jack smiled, hands tucked into his jacket pockets against the November chill. "He's making an effort," he observed. "For Emma's sake, I think, and maybe for yours too." The insight, delivered without jealousy or judgment, reminded Sarah again of why she had been drawn to Jack from the beginning. His emotional intelligence, his lack of ego, his genuine desire for others' well-being, even at potential cost to himself. "Sure, thank you for coming tonight," she said softly. It meant a lot to Emma, and to me, Jack's expression warmed. They wouldn't have missed it. "That turkey performance will go down in theatrical history." David returned from his call, his expression slightly preoccupied, but clearing as he rejoined the group. "Sorry about that. Hollywood never sleeps, apparently." He glanced at Emma, who was leaning sleepily against Sarah's side. "Someone looks ready for bed." "Past ready?" Sarah agreed. "We should get going." Goodbyes were exchanged, plans confirmed for the week ahead, David's regular Wednesday pickup of Emma from school, the Mustang viewing at Jack's garage, a potential weekend trip to the Children's Museum in the neighboring town that Emma had been asking to visit. As Sarah drove home, Emma already half asleep in the back seat clutching her two small bouquets, she found herself contemplating the strange new reality taking shape around them. Her past and present no longer in separate compartments, but intertwining, creating a future she couldn't have imagined when she first arrived in Riverside. David making a genuine effort to be the father he had never quite managed to be during their marriage. Jack offering friendship and possibly more, but with patience and respect for the complications of her situation. Emma flourishing in the midst of these changes, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, that she mattered, that her happiness was a priority for all the adults in her life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what Sarah had planned. But as she helped her drowsy daughter into pajamas, placed the flowers in water, and tucked Emma into bed surrounded by her growing collection of stuffed animals, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope of earlier days, when she'd clung to the possibility that David might change or that escape to Riverside might solve all their problems. But a steadier, more grounded hope built on evidence rather than wishes, on the reality of people showing up, making efforts, prioritizing connection over conflict. As Sarah prepared for bed herself, her phone chimed with a text from Jack. "Emma was amazing tonight. Thanks for including us in the celebration." And then moments later, another text, this one from David. "Thank you for raising such an incredible daughter. I know I missed a lot, but I'm grateful for the chance to be part of her life now." Two messages, so different in tone but similar in their genuine appreciation. Two men acknowledging her role as Emma's mother, respecting her authority in her daughter's life. Two possibilities for a future that suddenly seemed less daunting, less either-or, more open to nuance and complexity and unexpected grace. Sarah responded to both messages with simple thanks, then set her phone aside and crawled into bed, exhausted but content. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new opportunities for both connection and conflict. But tonight, in this moment, her daughter was happy. Her own heart was cautiously opening to possibilities. And the life they were building in Riverside, so different from what she had imagined, felt increasingly like home. What Sarah couldn't know, as she drifted off to sleep, was that the fragile equilibrium established that evening at the ice cream shop was already shifting. The David's agent had called with news that would force decisions, create new tensions, challenge the tentative peace that had been established. That the coming days would require choices from all of them, about priorities, about values, about the kind of life they wanted to build, and the people they wanted to build it with. That the true test of David's transformation and Jack's steadfastness was yet to come, as was the revelation of Sarah's own heart and what she truly wanted for herself and Emma, beyond mere stability and safety. The storm that had been brewing since David's arrival in Riverside was about to break in ways none of them had anticipated. And in its aftermath, nothing would be quite the same again. The following week brought the first real winter chill to Riverside, morning frost silvering the grass and breath fogging in the air. Sarah found herself settling into a routine that now included David as a regular presence. Wednesday and Friday afternoons with Emma, Sunday dinners together, occasional texts about Emma's activities or needs. It was strange how quickly the extraordinary could become ordinary, how the upheaval of David's return had transformed into a manageable reality. Emma seemed to be thriving with the attention, gradually becoming more comfortable calling him Daddy, without the questioning tone, sharing stories of her school day, asking about his work in a way that suggested she was beginning to understand who he was beyond simply father. Sarah maintained her boundaries, keeping her own relationship with David cordial but not intimate, focused on co-parenting rather than revisiting their past. And through it all, her connection with Jack continued to deepen, their text conversations expanding beyond Emma and Lily to include their own interests, challenges, hopes. They hadn't put a name to what was developing between them. Not dating, not officially, but something more than simple friendship. Movie nights after the girls were in bed, coffee together during Sarah's breaks at Talbot's, comfortable silences as they worked side by side preparing dinner for their daughters. It was in this context, this carefully balanced new normal, that David arrived at Reynolds Auto on Thursday afternoon, as arranged during the ice cream celebration. Sarah was at work, Emma at school, the garage relatively quiet when David's now familiar black SUV pulled into the lot. Jack was working alone, Mikey, his part-time helper, having left early for a dentist appointment. He wiped his hands on his red shop rag as David entered, offering a handshake that was returned with what appeared to be genuine warmth. "Thanks for making time," David said, glancing around the garage with interest. "This is a serious operation you've got here." "Small but functional," Jack replied with a modest shrug. "The Mustang's in the back bay. It's still mostly frame and engine at this point, but you'll get the idea." He led David toward the partially restored vehicle, explaining his vision for the project, the challenges he'd encountered, the satisfaction of seeing it gradually take shape. David listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that suggested he'd done some research since their last conversation. It was only after they discussed the Mustang at length, David expressing serious interest in commissioning a similar restoration for himself once Jack finished this project, that the conversation shifted to more personal territory. "Sarah mentioned you've been in Riverside for about 8 years?" David asked, leaning against a workbench as Jack checked something under the Mustang's hood. "Just about," Jack confirmed. "Moved here after the divorce when Lily was 5. Needed a fresh start, somewhere quieter than Chicago." "I get that," David said, his expression thoughtful. "That's what Sarah was looking for too, I think. A place away from the spotlight." Jack nodded, his hands still working even as he maintained the conversation. "Riverside is good for that. People mind their own business mostly. Let you be who you are without too many expectations." "I've noticed," David agreed, "though that's changing a bit now that I'm in town. Small town curiosity and all that." The observation wasn't accusatory, just a statement of fact. Jack glanced up from the engine, studying David with careful consideration. "Must be difficult," he commented, "being recognized everywhere you go, never having real privacy." "You get used to it," David replied with a slight shrug. "Or you think you do until something happens that makes you realize how much it's cost you, how much you've lost because you were too busy performing to notice what was real." The admission seemed genuine, A moment of vulnerability from a man who had built a career on calculated appearances. Jack straightened, wiping his hands again, his expression neutral but attentive. Sarah and Emma? He asked, though it wasn't really a question. David nodded, his gaze distant. Among other things. But yes, they're the biggest regret. The most important thing I failed at. There was a moment of silence. Both men aware of the delicate territory they were entering, the potential for conflict or connection, depending on what was said next. You're here now, Jack observed finally, making an effort. That counts for something. Does it? David's question seemed genuine, his expression troubled. Sometimes I wonder if it's too little, too late. If I've already done too much damage. Jack considered this, his natural inclination toward honesty warring with his awareness of the complicated dynamics at play. I think that's for Sarah and Emma to decide, he said finally. Not me, not you. All any of us can do is show up, be present, be genuine. The rest isn't in our control. David studied him, something like respect flickering in his expression. You care about them, he stated simply. I do, Jack acknowledged, not bothering to pretend otherwise. They're special people. Another silence, charged but not hostile. Two men acknowledging a shared appreciation for the same people. A potential point of conflict transformed into a moment of understanding. My agent called the other night, David said suddenly, changing the subject or perhaps revealing the true purpose of his visit. I've been offered a role, a good one, the kind that could put my career back on track. Jack nodded, unsure where this was going, but sensing its importance. Congratulations. It would mean leaving Riverside. David continued. Filming starts in New Zealand next month. 6 months on location. The implications were clear. David's renewed presence in Emma's life would be disrupted just as she was becoming comfortable with him again. The progress they'd made as father and daughter would be challenged by distance and time. That's a long time in a 6-year-old's world, Jack observed carefully. Exactly, David agreed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of genuine distress. I haven't told Sarah yet. Or Emma? I'm still trying to figure out what to do. Jack was silent for a moment, considering his response. This was delicate territory, offering advice to his friends, potential girlfriends, ex-husband about a decision that would impact people Jack cared deeply about. What are your options? He asked finally, choosing the most neutral approach. David sighed, leaning more heavily against the workbench. Take the role, leave for 6 months and risk undoing all the progress I've made with Emma. Or turn it down, stay in Riverside, and possibly watch my career fade into obscurity. Put that way, it did sound like an impossible choice. Jack could understand the dilemma, even sympathize with it, while still being acutely aware of what David's decision would mean for Emma and Sarah. Tough spot, he acknowledged. No easy answers there. No, David agreed. But I wanted to ask. He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. If I take the role, if I have to leave, would you look out for them? For Emma and Sarah? The request caught Jack off guard, its implication both flattering and concerning. They're more than capable of looking after themselves, he pointed out. Sarah especially. She's one of the strongest people I've ever met. I know, David said quickly. That's not what I meant. I've seen how Emma lights up when she talks about you and Lily. How much Sarah values your friendship. If I'm not here, if I have to go, I'd feel better knowing they have someone in their corner. Someone solid. The compliment, seemingly sincere, created a complicated mix of emotions in Jack. Pride that David had recognized his importance to Emma and Sarah. Wariness about the implications of making any promises to his, whatever Sarah was becoming's, ex-husband. Concern about overstepping boundaries that weren't his to define. Sarah and Emma will always have my support, he said finally, choosing his words with care. As a friend, as whatever they need me to be. But that would be true regardless of your decision, and it's not a responsibility you need to assign. It's a choice I've already made. David studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Something like respect settling in his expression. You're a good man, Jack Reynolds. Better than I was when it counted. Different circumstances. Jack replied with a slight shrug, uncomfortable with both the praise and the comparison. Different choices. We all do the best we can with what we know at the time. The conversation shifted back to safer territory after that. More discussion of the Mustang, arrangements for David to consult with Jack about his own potential classic car purchase, casual comments about Riverside and its quirks. But something had changed between them. A deeper understanding established. A mutual recognition of the other's importance in the lives of Sarah and Emma. What neither man fully articulated, what perhaps neither was ready to acknowledge explicitly, was that they were, in their different ways, both in love with the same woman. David with the memory of what he'd had and lost, with the idealized version of Sarah he'd created in his absence, with the possibility of redemption she represented. Jack with the real complex woman he'd come to know over the past months, with her strength and vulnerability, with the future they might build together if given the chance. And now a decision loomed that would shape all their lives. David's career opportunity, his choice to stay or go, the impact that choice would have on Emma, on Sarah, on the delicate balance they had all been maintaining. Later that evening, as Jack helped Lily with her algebra homework at their kitchen table, his phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "David just called. He wants to talk to me tomorrow about something important. Any idea what's going on?" Jack stared at the message, the knowledge of David's dilemma heavy in his mind. It wasn't his place to reveal what David had shared in confidence, but the urge to prepare Sarah, to cushion the potential blow, was strong. "He stopped by the garage today," he replied carefully. "Seemed to have something on his mind, but we mostly talk cars. I'm sure he'll explain tomorrow." A half-truth at best, but Jack couldn't see a better option. Whatever David decided, however he chose to present his options to Sarah, it needed to come from him directly. "Thanks," Sarah texted back. "Just anxious about what new complication might be heading our way." Emma's finally adjusting to having him around again. The concern in her message, the protective instinct for Emma that always guided Sarah's decisions, strengthened Jack's resolve. Whatever happened with David's career opportunity, whatever choice he made, Jack would be there for Sarah and Emma. Not because David had asked him to be, but because he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "Whatever it is, you'll handle it," he texted back. "You always do, and you're not alone anymore." The simple assurance offered without presumption or pressure was all he could give her in that moment. The rest would unfold as it would, shaped by choices none of them could fully control or predict. Across town, in his rented house, David sat staring at the script his agent had sent. The role of a lifetime, a character with depth and complexity, a project with award potential. The opportunity to resurrect his career, to prove he still had the talent and appeal that had made him a star. And all it would cost was 6 months away from the daughter he was just beginning to truly know. From the ex-wife whose quiet strength and resilience had reawakened feelings he'd thought long buried. 6 months that, in the world of a 6-year-old, might as well be forever. 6 months in which Jack Reynolds would be there, steady and present, building connections, creating memories, possibly becoming the father figure David had failed to be. The choice seemed impossible. Stay and possibly watch his career fade into obscurity, his identity as an actor, the only identity he'd truly embraced since his early 20s, gradually eroding. Or go and risk losing Emma all over again, this time perhaps permanently. As David flipped through the script, the weight of the decision pressing on him like a physical presence, he found himself thinking about Jack's words at the garage. "All any of us can do is show up, be present, be genuine. The rest isn't in our control." Simple wisdom from a man who seemed to embody the qualities David had always performed but never truly internalized. Authenticity, reliability, emotional honesty. The kind of man who fixed things, who built things, who created stability rather than chaos. The kind of man Sarah deserved. The kind of father Emma needed. The realization brought a complex surge of emotions. Grief for what he had lost through his own choices, respect for the life Sarah had built without him, a strange mixture of jealousy and gratitude toward Jack for being what David had not. And beneath it all, a question that would shape his decision more than career considerations or practical logistics. What kind of man did David Taylor want to be? The actor who chased success and validation through roles and acclaim? Or the father who prioritized his daughter's well-being over his own ambitions? It was a question he had never fully confronted, always finding ways to believe he could be both, could have it all. But now with the script in his hands and tomorrow's conversation with Sarah looming, the time for such comfortable self-deception was past. A choice had to be made. And for perhaps the first time in his adult life, David found himself facing a decision where the right answer wasn't the one that benefited him most directly, where the consequences reached beyond his own satisfaction or success. As he set the script aside and prepared for bed, David thought again of Jack's garage. The orderly tools, the projects in various stages of completion, the sense of purpose and craftsmanship that permeated the space. So different from the transient, appearance-focused world of Hollywood, where everything was temporary, disposable, replaceable, including he had once believed relationships, including family. Now facing the prospect of losing Emma again, of disrupting the fragile trust they were rebuilding, David wasn't so sure. Some things once broken could not be easily fixed. Some choices once made shaped all the choices that followed. Tomorrow's conversation with Sarah would reveal which path he had chosen, which version of himself he had decided to embrace. And whatever that decision might be, it would change all their lives in ways none of them could fully anticipate. The coffee shop Sarah had suggested for their meeting was busy, but not crowded. The Friday morning rush having subsided to a steady trickle of customers. She had arranged to take a late lunch from Talbot's, leaving her the hour between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. to meet with David before picking Emma up from school. He was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, hers prepared exactly as she preferred it. A small detail that reminded her of how well they had once known each other, how closely they had once orbited each other's lives. "Thank you for making time," David said as she settled across from him, his expression more serious than she had seen it since his arrival in Riverside. "I know your schedule is tight. You said it was important," Sarah replied, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, a buffer against both the November chill and her own anxiety about this conversation. "Is everything okay? Is it about Emma?" "In a way," David acknowledged. "It's about all of us, really." He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "My agent called earlier this week. I've been offered a role. A significant one." Sarah nodded, unsurprised by this development. Despite his recent career setbacks, David was still a recognized name, still possessed of the talent and charisma that had made him a star. "That's good news, isn't it?" "It could be," David agreed. "It's the kind of project that could put my career back on track. Director with Oscar nominations, solid script, strong supporting cast." There was a but coming. Sarah could hear it in his tone, could see it in the tension around his eyes. "When does filming start?" she asked, suspecting this was the crux of the issue. "Next month," David confirmed. "In New Zealand. 6 months on location, possibly longer if there are reshoots." The implications were immediately clear. 6 months away would undo much of the progress David had made with Emma, would disrupt the routine they had cautiously established, would essentially reset their relationship to where it had been before his arrival in Riverside. "I see," Sarah said carefully, studying him across the table. "Have you made a decision?" David met her gaze directly, something vulnerable in his expression that she wasn't accustomed to seeing. "That's why I wanted to talk to you first. This affects Emma more than anyone, and you, since you'd be dealing with the fallout if I leave again. The acknowledgement of potential consequences, the consideration for how his choices might impact others. This was new from David, a departure from the self-focused decision-making that had characterized their marriage. What are you thinking?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about his perspective, about how he was approaching this dilemma. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine distress rather than calculated dishevelment. "Honestly, I'm torn. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. The role would have been everything. But now," he shook his head, "now there's Emma. Now there's the progress we've made, the trust we're rebuilding. Walking away from that, even temporarily, it doesn't feel like the right choice." Sarah studied him, trying to see past the polished exterior to the truth beneath. Was this genuine growth? Actual prioritization of his daughter over his career? Or just another performance? Another role designed to elicit a specific response? "You've never turned down a role for family reasons before?" she observed, the statement neutral but loaded with their shared history. The missed birthdays, the abbreviated holidays, the constant prioritization of career opportunities over family needs. "I know," David acknowledged, no defensiveness in his tone, just a quiet recognition of past failures. "That's part of why we're sitting here in a coffee shop instead of still being married. Part of why I barely know my own daughter." He met her gaze directly. "I'm trying to learn from my mistakes with Sarah, trying to be better than I was. But I'm still figuring out what that looks like in practice." The admission, unvarnished and seemingly sincere, gave Sarah pause. This wasn't the David she had known during their marriage. The confident star who assumed his choices were inherently correct, who expected her to arrange her life and Emma's around his career needs. This was someone more reflective, more aware of the impact of his decisions on others. "What would happen if you turned it down?" she asked. Career-wise, I mean. David sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. It wouldn't be great. My last film underperformed. The one before that barely broke even. Hollywood has a short memory for past successes and a long one for recent failures. He shrugged, a gesture that contained more genuine resignation than she would have expected. I'd survive. There would be other roles eventually. Smaller ones, probably. TV rather than film. A different kind of career than what I've had. The assessment seemed realistic, lacking the boundless optimism that had often characterized David's view of his professional prospects. Another change. Another indication that perhaps he was seeing the world more clearly than he once had. And if you take it? Sarah pressed. What happens with Emma? That's the question, isn't it? David replied, his expression troubled. I could fly back when possible, though the shooting schedule and distance would make that challenging. We could video call regularly. I'd send presents, letters. He trailed off, seeming to recognize the inadequacy of these solutions, even as he proposed them. She's 6, David, Sarah said gently. 6 months is forever in her world. Video calls and presents aren't the same as presents. I know, he acknowledged, the admission clearly painful. That's why I'm struggling with this decision. Why I wanted to talk to you before making it. Sarah took a sip of her coffee, considering her response carefully. This conversation felt pivotal, a moment that would shape not just David's relationship with Emma, but the dynamics among all of them. David, Emma, Sarah herself, and by extension, Jack and Lily. What do you want me to say? She asked finally. That it's okay to leave again, that Emma will understand, that we'll manage without you, or that you should turn down the role, stay in Riverside, prioritize being a father over being an actor. David shook his head, a rueful smile touching his lips. Always direct, aren't you? That's something I've always admired about you, even when it was inconvenient for me. He sighed. I don't expect you to make this decision for me. I just want to understand what it would mean for Emma if I go. How much damage it might do to what we're building. The question was genuine, the concern behind it seemingly real. Sarah considered her answer carefully, aware of the responsibility in shaping David's understanding of their daughter's emotional landscape. Emma is resilient, she said finally. All children are by necessity. She's adapted to your absence before, and she would again if needed. She paused, making sure David was truly hearing her. But there would be cost, confusion, questions about why Daddy came back just to leave again. Doubt about whether you'll return, whether your love is conditional, whether she did something wrong. David winced at this assessment, pain flickering across his features. I don't want that for her. I know, Sarah acknowledged, which is why this is difficult. There's no perfect solution here, David. Either choice involves sacrifice, your career or your presence in Emma's daily life. The question is which sacrifice you can live with, which priority truly matters more to you. They sat in silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the coffee shop creating a buffer around their conversation, a small pocket of privacy in the public space. I talked to Jack yesterday, David said suddenly, the change of subject catching Sarah off guard. At his garage. I know, she replied. He mentioned you stopped by. David nodded, his expression thoughtful. He's a good man, solid, the kind who builds things to last. He met Sarah's gaze directly, the kind who stays. The observation hung between them, loaded with implication. Sarah felt a flush rise to her cheeks, unsure how to respond to this acknowledgement of Jack's importance in their lives. Yes, she agreed simply. He is. He cares about you, David continued, his tone careful, free of accusation or jealousy. About Emma, too. That's clear. Itinam. Sarah studied him, trying to understand where this was going. Jack has been kind to us, she said cautiously. A good friend when we needed one. More than a friend, I think. David suggested gently. At least potentially. And that's okay, Sarah. It's good, actually. Emma should have someone steady in her life. Someone who shows up, who builds rather than performs. He smiled, a small, self-deprecating expression. Someone better than I was. The admission, unexpected and seemingly genuine, left Sarah momentarily speechless. This was not the conversation she had anticipated when David asked to meet, not the reaction she would have expected from the man she had been married to. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. You don't need to say anything, David assured her. I just wanted you to know that I see it. What's developing between you and Jack. And I'm not here to interfere with that, or to try to reclaim what I lost through my own choices. He hesitated, then continued with careful honesty. Still care about you, Sarah. I probably always will. But I know I forfeited any right to your heart a long time ago. The simple acknowledgement, free of drama or manipulation, touched Sarah deeply. This was growth, real and substantial. David seeing her as a person with her own life and choices, rather than as an extension of himself, as a character in his story. Thank you for saying that, she said quietly. It means a lot. David nodded, accepting her response without pushing for more. So, about the role? He continued, returning to the original purpose of their meeting. I'm still torn. Still trying to figure out what the right choice is for Emma and for me. Sarah considered her response carefully, aware of the weight of this moment, of the potential impact her words might have on David's decision, and by extension, on Emma's relationship with her father. I can't tell you what to do, she said finally. This has to be your choice based on your priorities, your values. But I will say this, Emma deserves a father who chooses her actively and intentionally. Whether that means turning down this role or finding a way to be meaningfully present despite the distance, that's the standard I hope you'll hold yourself to. David absorbed this, nodding slowly. Fair enough. That's a clear framework to consider. They finished their coffee in a silence that was not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. A thoughtful pause between two people with a complicated shared history, attempting to navigate new territory with mutual respect, if not complete understanding. As they prepared to leave, David collecting their empty cups while Sarah gathered her purse, he asked one final question. If I take the role, if I go to New Zealand, would you be willing to help Emma understand why? To put it in context for her, to help her see it as a temporary absence rather than abandonment? The request was reasonable, the concern behind it seemingly genuine. Sarah found herself nodding. Of course, whatever you decide, I'll help Emma process it as best I can. She's my priority always. I know, David said softly. That's one thing that's never changed. Your devotion to her, your willingness to put her needs first. It's your greatest strength, Sarah. One I'm only now learning to emulate. They parted ways outside the coffee shop, David heading toward his rented house to continue wrestling with his decision. Sarah returning to Talbot's for the remainder of her shift before picking Emma up from school. As she walked, Sarah found her thoughts drifting to Jack, to his steady presence, to the warmth that filled her when they were together, to the future they might build if given the chance. David's acknowledgement of their developing relationship had surprised her, but it had also created a sense of permission, of closure on a chapter of her life that had remained partially open despite the divorce. Whatever David decided about the role, about staying in Riverside or returning to his career in full force, Sarah felt increasingly certain about her own path forward. The life she was building here, with Emma at its center and Jack becoming an increasingly important part of its fabric, felt right in a way her marriage to David never truly had. Solid, authentic, built on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than glamour and performance. That evening, as Sarah helped Emma with her homework at their kitchen table, her phone chimed with a text from Jack. How did the talk with David go? Everything okay? The simple inquiry, the genuine concern it conveyed, brought a smile to Sarah's face. Still processing, she replied truthfully. He has a big career decision to make. We'll see what he chooses. Jack's response came quickly. Whatever happens, you and Emma will be all right. You're stronger than you know. The vote of confidence offered without questions or demands for details reinforced what Sarah had been feeling since her conversation with David. That regardless of his choice, her own path was becoming clearer. That the future she wanted for herself and Emma included Jack and Lily, included the solid foundation of mutual respect and genuine caring they were building together. We're making tacos for dinner, she texted back. Emma insists they taste better when you and Lily help make them. Want to join us? The invitation, simple but meaningful, was a small step forward on that path. Jack's response, absolutely. Lily says she'll bring her secret guacamole recipe. See you in 30, was another. As Sarah set her phone aside and returned to helping Emma with her spelling words, she felt a sense of peace settling over her. Whatever David decided, whatever complications lay ahead, the foundation she was building here in Riverside was strong enough to weather the storms. Strong enough to support not just survival, but growth, connection, and eventually perhaps love. What she couldn't know was that across town, in his rented house, David had made his decision. That he was on the phone with his agent, explaining his choice in terms the Hollywood veteran found difficult to comprehend. that he was setting in motion changes that would reshape not just his career, but his identity, his priorities, his understanding of success and failure. That the script for the role of a lifetime lay on his coffee table, pages unturned, future unrealized. And beside it, a small frame photo of Emma from her school play, turkey headband askew, smile radiant, eyes bright with the pure joy of a child who felt seen, loved, important. A photo that had, in the end, made his impossible choice surprisingly clear. The next week passed in a curious limbo, with David maintaining his regular schedule with Emma. Wednesday and Friday afternoons, Sunday dinner, while making no mention of his decision about the role or his plans for the future. Sarah didn't press him, respecting his need to process his choice and perhaps arrange his affairs before making any announcements. Emma continued to flourish, her relationship with David growing more comfortable, her excitement about seeing him no longer tinged with the anxiety and uncertainty of those first encounters. She spoke of Daddy, with increasing ease incorporating him into her stories and plans, creating artwork for his refrigerator just as she did for their apartment and for Jack's house. And Sarah's connection with Jack deepened further, their time together expanding beyond simple dinners and practical assistance to include quiet conversations after the girls were asleep. Shared interests discovered and explored, a growing physical awareness that expressed itself in lingering glances and accidental touches that felt anything but accidental. They hadn't put a name to what was developing between them, hadn't formalized it with declarations or definitions. But the trajectory was clear, the destination increasingly certain, even if the path and timing remained flexible, respectful of the complications in both their lives. It was in this context, this strange, suspended moment between what had been and what would be, that the first snowfall of the season arrived in Riverside. Not the dusting of early winter that usually preceded the heavier snows of December, but a substantial overnight accumulation that transformed the town into a winter wonderland and resulted in school cancellations across the county. Sarah awoke to Emma's excited voice at her bedroom door. "Mommy, it's snow day. School is closed. Can we build a snowman?" Groggily checking her phone, Sarah confirmed that Riverside Elementary was indeed closed, as was Talbot's for the morning at least, though Georgia's expected to open for the dinner shift as usual. A rare weekday of freedom stretched before them, unscheduled and full of possibility. "Yes, we can build a snowman," Sarah agreed, smiling at Emma's jubilant dance. After breakfast, and after we find all your snow gear, Emma was already racing back to her room, presumably to begin the search for snow pants and mittens, when Sarah's phone chimed with a text from Jack. "Snow day! Lily's already planning an epic snowball battle at the park. You and Emma want to join? Hot chocolate afterwards at our place." The invitation brought a smile to Sarah's face, the prospect of spending the unexpected free day with Jack and Lily adding to its appeal. "Emma would love that," she texted back. "So would I. What time?" They arranged to meet at the small park near Jack's house at 10 a.m., giving everyone time for breakfast and snow gear assembly. Sarah had just finished helping Emma into her snowsuit, an ordeal involving multiple layers and a brief search for a missing boot, when her phone rang. David, his name lighting up the screen. "Hey," she answered, tucking the phone between her shoulder and ear as she zipped Emma's coat. "Everything okay?" "Snow day," David replied, the smile evident in his voice. "I was wondering if Emma might want to join me for some sledding. There's a great hill near my place, and I picked up a sled last week just in case we got snow." The innocent request created an immediate dilemma. Sarah had already committed to meeting Jack and Lily at the park, an arrangement Emma was enthusiastically anticipating. But David's time with Emma was limited to his scheduled days, and an unexpected snow day represented a bonus opportunity for them to build memories together. Actually, Sarah began cautiously, "We already have plans to meet Jack and Lily at the park for a snowball fight." Emma's pretty excited about it. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then David's voice returned, carefully neutral. "Of course. I should have called earlier. No problem." The disappointment was evident despite his attempt to hide it, creating a twinge of guilt in Sarah. This was exactly the kind of situation she had hoped to avoid. Emma caught between competing invitations, adults navigating the complex terrain of shared time and attention. But, she continued, making a spontaneous decision. "Maybe you could join us. I'm sure Emma would love to have both her dad and her friends there. And your sledding hill sounds perfect for after the snowball fight." The suggestion was a risk, bringing David, Jack, and Lily together for an unstructured social activity rather than a more formal, bounded event like Emma's school play. But it also felt like the right choice, a way to prioritize Emma's relationships with all the important people in her life without creating artificial divisions or forced choices. "Are you sure?" David asked, surprise and something like hope in his voice. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your plans with Jack and Lily." "You wouldn't be intruding," Sarah assured him, though she wasn't entirely certain this was true. "Emma would love having everyone together, and I think it's good for her to see the adults in her life getting along, finding ways to share time with her." There was another pause, then David's voice returned, warmer now. "I'd like that. Thank you, Sarah. What time should I meet you there?" Arrangements made, Sarah quickly texted Jack to let him know about the change in plans. "Hope it's okay. David called about spending time with Emma today, and I invited him to join us at the park. Don't want to make things awkward, but seemed like the best solution for Emma." Jack's response came promptly. "No problem at all. The more the merrier for snowball fights. See you all soon." The simple acceptance, free of jealousy or territoriality, reinforced Sarah's growing certainty about Jack's character, his generosity of spirit, his prioritization of Emma's needs over any potential adult complications, his genuine desire for harmony rather than conflict. The park was already busy when they arrived, families taking advantage of the unexpected holiday to enjoy the pristine snow. Lily spotted them immediately, waving enthusiastically from a partially constructed snow fort, her teenage dignity temporarily abandoned in the face of winter's first offering. "Emma, come help us build the walls stronger," she called, Rusty barking excitedly beside her, his golden fur dusted with snow. Emma needed no further encouragement, racing toward the fort with an excited squeal, immediately dropping to her knees to help pack snow onto the growing structure. Sarah followed more slowly, smiling as Jack emerged from behind the fort, snow covering his knit hat and the shoulders of his coat. "We've been fortifying our position," he explained with mock seriousness. "Strategic planning is essential in snowball warfare." "I can see that," Sarah replied, laughing as Rusty bounded over to greet her, leaving paw prints in the pristine snow. "Very impressive defenses." Jack's smile was warm despite the cold air, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that had become increasingly dear to Sarah. "Thanks for coming. Snow days should be celebrated properly." "Agreed," Sarah said, stomping her boots to clear excess snow. "Oh, and David should be here soon. He's bringing a sled for after the snowball fight." Jack nodded, his expression revealing nothing but easy acceptance. "Perfect. More manpower for Team Awesome." "Team Awesome?" Sarah questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Lily's name, not mine," Jack clarified with a grin. "Though I have to admit it's growing on me." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's excited call. "Daddy's here, and he has 2 sleds." Sarah turned to see David approaching across the snow-covered park, indeed carrying 2 bright red plastic sleds under his arm. He was dressed more casually than she was accustomed to seeing him, in jeans and a practical winter coat rather than his usual designer attire, his hair hidden beneath a knit cap similar to Jack's. "Hope I'm not late," he called as he reached them, setting the sleds down in the snow. Traffic was surprisingly heavy for a snow day. "Perfect timing," Jack replied, extending a hand in greeting. "We're just finalizing our fortifications before the battle begins." David returned the handshake with what appeared to be genuine warmth, then crouched down to Emma's level as she raced over to examine the sleds. "What do you think, Princess?" "One for you and one for Lily when you're ready to try the big hill." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Can we go now, please?" "Snowball fight first," Sarah reminded her gently. "That was the plan, remember?" "Then sledding." Emma nodded, accepting this schedule with minimal disappointment, especially when Lily called her back to the fort to help prepare their ammunition. A growing pile of carefully crafted snowballs. The adults exchanged amused glances over the girls' heads, momentarily united in appreciation of childhood enthusiasm. Then Jack gestured toward the fort. "Shall we join the preparations? Team Awesome needs all hands on deck." The next hour passed in a blur of laughter, good-natured competition, and increasingly elaborate snow structures. What began as a simple fort evolved into a complex of walls and towers, with David contributing architectural suggestions that transformed their defensive position into something resembling a snow castle. The actual snowball fight, when it finally commenced, was chaotic and joyful. Alliances forming and dissolving, truces called and broken, Emma shrieking with delight as she landed a perfect shot on Jack's shoulder. Lily demonstrating surprisingly accurate aim for someone who claimed to dislike sports. Sarah found herself breathless with laughter, dodging behind snow walls, forming impromptu alliances with first Jack, then David, then both girls against both men. The complicated dynamics that usually hovered beneath their interactions were temporarily suspended, replaced by the simple pleasure of play, of being present in the moment without agenda or expectation. At one point, taking refuge behind a snow wall with David while Jack and the girls plotted their next attack, Sarah caught her ex-husband watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Something between wistfulness and acceptance, between regret and resolution. "What?" she asked, slightly self-conscious under his steady gaze. David shook his head, a small smile touching his lips. "Just thinking about how long it's been since I've seen you laugh like that. Really laugh without reservation." He glanced toward Jack, who was helping Emma perfect her snowball technique. "He's good for you, for both of you." The observation, offered without resentment or manipulation, caught Sarah off guard. "Yes," she acknowledged simply. "He is." David nodded, his expression settling into something like peace. "I'm glad. You deserve someone solid, Sarah. Someone who sees your worth and doesn't take it for granted." Before she could respond to this unexpected statement, their temporary sanctuary was breached by a barrage of snowballs, Emma and Lily having executed a surprise flanking maneuver with Jack's assistance. The moment passed, replaced by renewed battle and laughter, but the exchange lingered in Sarah's mind. A quiet acknowledgement, a passing of something between them that felt like closure, like the final turning of a page. After the snowball fight, which ended in a declared truce when all participants were thoroughly snow-covered and beginning to feel the cold, they migrated to the sledding hill David had mentioned. It was indeed perfect, steep enough to be exciting but not dangerous, with a long, gentle run out at the bottom to allow sleds to slow naturally. Emma and Lily took to it immediately, sharing the 2 sleds David had brought, racing each other down the hill with increasing daring, their cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. The adults watched from the top of the hill, taking turns accompanying the girls on particularly fast runs or helping drag the sleds back up the incline. "Hot chocolate time?" Jack suggested eventually, noting Emma's increasing shivers despite her protests that she wasn't cold at all. "My place is just a few blocks from here. Everyone's welcome." The invitation was extended naturally, inclusive of David, without awkwardness or hesitation. Sarah glanced at her ex-husband, trying to gauge his reaction to being included in what had become a regular ritual for her and Emma, with Jack and Lily. "Thanks," David replied, seeming genuinely appreciative of the offer. "But I should probably head back soon. I have a call scheduled with my agent this afternoon." He turned to Emma, who had rejoined them at the mention of hot chocolate. "But you go have fun with Lily and Jack, Princess. Maybe we can go sledding again tomorrow after school if the snow holds?" Emma nodded, momentarily torn between disappointment at her father's departure and anticipation of hot chocolate with Lily. "Promise you'll come tomorrow? Even if it's just a little bit of snow left." "Promise," David assured her, crouching down to her level. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." The phrase, one he had used during their marriage when making promises to Emma that he often failed to keep, gave Sarah pause. But something in David's expression, in the steadiness of his gaze as he made the commitment to their daughter, suggested that perhaps this time the promise would be honored, the priority maintained. They parted ways at the edge of the park, David heading toward his rented house with a final wave, Sarah and Emma walking with Jack and Lily toward their home, the sleds David had insisted they borrow trailing behind them in the snow. Jack's house was warm and welcoming after the cold outdoor adventure, the girls shedding snow gear in the entryway, while Jack headed to the kitchen to prepare the promised hot chocolate. Sarah helped corral damp mittens and boots, then followed him, leaving Emma and Lily to decide on a movie to watch while they warmed up. "Need a hand?" she offered, leaning against the kitchen doorway as Jack gathered mugs and the ingredients for his special hot chocolate, made with real melted chocolate rather than powder, a fact he took considerable pride in. "Always," he replied with a warm smile. "You can start the milk heating if you want." They moved around the kitchen with the easy synchronicity that had developed between them over the past months, preparing hot chocolate and a plate of cookies, their conversation comfortable and unforced. "Thanks for being so welcoming to David today," Sarah said as she stirred the warming milk. "I know it was a last-minute change of plans." Jack shrugged, breaking chocolate into small pieces to melt more easily. It seemed important for Emma, and honestly, he's been making a real effort with her. That counts for a lot in my book. The simple acceptance, The lack of jealousy or territorial behavior reinforced what Sarah had been feeling with increasing certainty, that Jack was genuinely good, genuinely kind, genuinely invested in Emma's well-being, even when it meant accommodating her relationship with David. Still, she insisted, it was generous of you. Not everyone would be so understanding. Jack glanced up from his chocolate preparation, his expression serious now. Emma deserves a good relationship with her father, and you deserve to co-parent without unnecessary drama or complications. He hesitated, then continued with careful honesty. I care about both of you too much to be the source of any additional stress or conflict. The simple declaration, unembellished but profound, caught Sarah in a vulnerable place, the tender, cautious part of her heart that had been gradually opening to the possibility of loving again, of trusting again, of building something new and solid after the collapse of her marriage. Jack, she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say, but feeling the need to acknowledge the weight of his statement. Before she could continue, he crossed the small kitchen to stand before her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could notice the slight unevenness of his 5 o'clock shadow. Sarah, he said softly, one hand reaching up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. I'm not going anywhere. However this unfolds, whatever David decides about his career, whatever you need from me, friend, support system, something more eventually, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations, just here. The promise, offered without demand or condition, touched something deep within Sarah. A longing for security, for consistency, for love that didn't require performance or perfection. Before she could overthink it, she leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his. A kiss as much about gratitude as attraction, as much about acknowledgement as passion. Jack responded with equal gentleness, his hand coming to rest lightly on her waist, the contact warm and steady like everything else about him. The kiss was brief but profound, a crossing of a threshold they had been approaching for months, a silent confirmation of feelings that had been growing between them. When they separated, Jack's smile was tender, his eyes warm with an emotion Sarah was increasingly certain matched her own. The milk's about to boil over, he murmured, his practical observation somehow endearing rather than mood-breaking. Sarah turned quickly to attend to the nearly boiling milk, a flush rising to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the kitchen's warmth. Can't have that, she replied, her voice slightly unsteady. Emma would never forgive us for ruining the hot chocolate. They finished their preparations in a companionable silence, charged with new awareness, new possibility. As they carried the mugs and cookies to the living room where Emma and Lily had settled on the couch with Rusty between them, Sarah felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place, of a future unfolding that held more promise than she had dared to imagine when she first arrived in Riverside. What she couldn't know was that across town, David was having the conversation with his agent that would change all their lives, declining the role in New Zealand, explaining his decision to prioritize his relationship with Emma, setting in motion a cascade of professional and personal consequences that would reshape his understanding of success, of fatherhood, of what truly mattered in the life of David Taylor. That evening, as Sarah and Emma returned to their apartment, the borrowed sled stored in the Toyota's trunk for the promised sledding adventure the next day, Sarah's phone chimed with a text from David. Made a decision about the role. Would like to talk to you and Emma about it. Dinner tomorrow night? The message was simple, direct, lacking the careful charm that had once characterized David's communications. Sarah typed back a quick confirmation, curious about his decision but already feeling a sense of peace about whatever it might be. Because regardless of whether David stayed in Riverside or returned to his career in full force, Sarah was increasingly certain about her own path forward. The life she was building here, with Emma at its center and Jack becoming an essential part of its fabric, felt right in a way her marriage to David never truly had. Authentic, supportive, built on mutual respect and genuine connection. The kiss in Jack's kitchen had confirmed what she had been feeling for months, that her heart had healed enough to risk loving again, that Jack was worth that risk, that the future they might build together could be something solid and true and lasting. As she tucked Emma into bed that night, surrounded by her growing collection of stuffed animals, Sarah felt a sense of gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. For the unexpected snow day that had brought clarity, for Emma's resilience and joy, for David's apparent growth and self-awareness, for Jack's steady presence and open heart, for second chances in all their many forms. Across town, in his rented house, David sat with a glass of whiskey, contemplating the decision he had made and the path that now lay before him. The role he had declined represented more than just a film opportunity. It was the kind of project that could have resurrected his fading star, could have reminded Hollywood of his talent and bankability, could have secured his professional identity for years to come. And yet, as he had explained to his incredulous agent earlier that day, the cost was too high. 6 months away from Emma, 6 months of broken promises and missed moments. 6 months that might permanently damage the fragile trust they were rebuilding. It was a price he was no longer willing to pay. What does that mean for your career? His agent had demanded, frustration evident even through the phone connection. You can't just walk away from opportunities like this. Not at this stage. Not with the momentum you need to rebuild. Maybe I need to redefine what success looks like. David had replied, surprising himself with the calm certainty in his voice. Maybe it's time to consider what kind of legacy I'm creating beyond box office numbers and award nominations. The conversation that followed had been difficult, filled with professional realities and hard truths about the entertainment industry's unforgiving nature. But in the end, his agent had reluctantly agreed to explore alternatives. Television projects with shorter filming commitments, roles that might accommodate a more balanced life, opportunities that wouldn't require extended absences from Riverside and Emma. It was a gamble, professionally speaking, a step back from the trajectory David had pursued single-mindedly for most of his adult life, a recalibration of priorities that might well result in a very different career than the one he had built. But as he sipped his whiskey and contemplated the day just past, Emma's laughter as they sledded down the hill, her trust as she placed her small hand in his, her delight in having both her father and her friends together in one place, David felt a certainty that transcended professional calculations. This was the right choice. The only choice that would allow him to become the father Emma deserved, to create the legacy that truly mattered, to build a life based on genuine connection rather than performance and acclaim. And if that meant a smaller house, fewer magazine covers, a different kind of recognition, well, perhaps that was a fair exchange for the chance to know his daughter, to be present for her life, to witness her growth and contribute to her happiness in ways that mattered. As for Sarah and Jack, David had seen the way they looked at each other, the easy comfort between them, the natural unit they formed with their daughters. It had stirred a complex mixture of emotions: regret for what he had carelessly discarded, jealousy for the connection he had failed to nurture, and surprisingly, a genuine wish for Sarah's happiness with a man who seemed capable of offering what David himself had not. Tomorrow's dinner would be an opportunity to share his decision with Emma and Sarah, to begin the process of redefining their family, not as husband and wife, but as co-parents committed to their daughter's well-being, to establish new boundaries, new expectations, new patterns of interaction that respected both the past they had shared and the futures they were building separately. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But as David set aside his empty glass and prepared for bed, he felt a sense of purpose, of clarity, that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. Not the role of a lifetime, perhaps, but the life of a role that mattered more than any he had ever played on screen. The next evening, Sarah and Emma arrived at the small Italian restaurant David had chosen for their dinner. Not Giorgio's, where Sarah worked, but a similar family-style establishment on the other side of Riverside. Emma was buzzing with excitement from their after-school sledding adventure, chattering about the super-fast hill David had discovered behind the elementary school, barely pausing for breath as Sarah helped her remove her coat. David was already seated at a corner booth, rising to greet them with a warm smile that seemed genuinely relaxed, devoid of the calculated charm Sarah had grown to recognize during their marriage. "There's my snow champion," he said as Emma launched herself at him for a hug. "Did you tell Mom about our awesome sledding run?" "The biggest hill," Emma confirmed, climbing into the booth beside him. "And I went down all by myself and didn't even fall off once." "Very impressive," Sarah acknowledged, settling across from them and accepting the menu David passed her way. "Though I noticed Daddy is leaving out the part where he wiped out at the bottom." David laughed, a genuine sound that contained actual self-deprecation, rather than the carefully modulated humility he had once performed when required. "In my defense, there was a hidden patch of ice, and I maintain that it was a strategic fall to demonstrate what not to do." The easy banter, the shared parenting moment, felt surprisingly comfortable, A glimpse of what their relationship might have been under different circumstances, with different choices, with the growth and maturity both had developed since their divorce. After they ordered pizza for Emma, pasta for the adults, a shared appetizer of garlic bread that Emma attacked with enthusiasm, David's expression grew more serious, though he maintained a gentle smile for Emma's benefit. "I wanted to talk to you both about something important," he began, his gaze moving between Sarah and Emma. "It's about my work, about some decisions I've made recently." Emma looked up from her garlic bread, a slight furrow appearing between her brows. "Are you going away again?" she asked, the question direct and perceptive in the way children often are, cutting straight to the heart of her concern. David shook his head, reaching out to gently smooth Emma's hair. "No, Princess. That's actually what I wanted to tell you. I was offered a job, a movie role that would have meant going far away for many months. But I decided not to take it." Emma's expression brightened immediately. "So you're staying in Riverside? Forever and ever?" "Well, not quite forever," David clarified, glancing at Sarah as if seeking support for how to explain complex adult realities to a 6-year-old. "But for a long time, yes. I've rented my house through the spring, and I'm looking for work that will let me stay here, or at least not be gone for more than a few weeks at a time." Sarah found herself genuinely surprised by this declaration, despite having suspected that David might decline the role in New Zealand. The commitment to staying in Riverside long-term, to actively seeking work that would accommodate his presence in Emma's life, represented a more fundamental shift than she had anticipated. "What about your career?" she asked, genuinely curious about how he was reconciling this decision with his professional identity. "Won't turning down the role impact your standing in the industry?" David shrugged, a gesture that contained more genuine acceptance than resignation. "Probably. But I'm exploring other options. Television projects filmed closer to home, supporting roles with shorter time commitments, even some directing possibilities down the line." He smiled, a small private expression. "Turns out there's more than one way to be an actor, more than one definition of success." The statement, simple but profound, revealed a depth of personal growth that Sarah found both surprising and moving. This was not the David she had married, the ambitious young actor determined to become a leading man at any cost, the rising star who had prioritized career advancement over family commitments without hesitation. This was someone who had faced difficult truths, who had reevaluated priorities, who had chosen a path based on values rather than external validation. Someone who, perhaps for the first time, was making choices based on who he wanted to be rather than who he thought he should be. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, the words emerging before she had fully formulated the thought. "That couldn't have been an easy decision." David looked momentarily taken aback by her statement, then nodded, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." Emma, following the adult conversation with the focused attention of a child who knows the topic concerns her directly, tugged at David's sleeve. "So you'll still be here for my birthday? And Christmas? And when I learned to ride a 2-wheel bike in the spring?" David turned to her, his expression solemn. "Yes to all of those things. That's exactly why I made this choice, Emma. Because I don't want to miss those moments anymore. I want to be here, to be part of your life, to watch you grow and learn and become the amazing person you're already starting to be." The simple declaration, delivered with unvarnished sincerity, brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. This was what she had wanted for Emma from the beginning. A father who showed up, who prioritized her well-being, who recognized the value of presence over presence, of consistency over grand gestures. "And what about Mommy?" Emma asked, her question innocent but loaded with implication. "Will you live with us again?" The question hung in the air between them, a child's natural desire for family unity colliding with the complex reality of adult relationships and their irreparable fractures. Sarah tensed, unsure how David would respond, how to navigate this delicate territory without crushing Emma's hopes or creating unrealistic expectations. David handled it with a gentleness and honesty that surprised her. "No, Princess, your mom and I aren't going to live together again. We care about each other very much, and we both love you more than anything in the world, but we're better as friends now than as husband and wife." He glanced at Sarah, seeking confirmation of this assessment. "We'll always be a family because of you, but it will be a different kind of family than before. One where Mom has her home, and I have mine, and you are loved in both places." The explanation, tailored to Emma's understanding, but not condescending or evasive, seemed to satisfy her. She nodded, processing this information with the resilience of childhood. "Like Zoe at school. She has a mom house and a dad house, and she gets 2 bedrooms and 2 birthday parties. Something like that. David agreed with a small smile. Though let's talk about the 2 birthday parties idea. That sounds suspiciously like double presents. Emma giggled, the serious moment passing as their food arrived, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. The snow that was beginning to melt, the upcoming holiday concert at Emma's school, the growing collection of stuffed animals that now required their own dedicated shelf in her bedroom. As they ate, Sarah found herself studying David with new eyes, seeing not just the handsome face that had graced movie posters and magazine covers, but the person beneath the polished exterior, a man grappling with fundamental questions about identity and purpose, about fatherhood and legacy, about what truly constituted a life well lived. It was a version of David she had glimpsed occasionally during their marriage, usually in private moments away from the demands and expectations of his career, but that had never fully emerged or taken precedence over the actor, the performer, the public figure. Now that version seemed to be asserting itself, becoming integrated with rather than subordinate to his professional identity. After dinner, as they prepared to leave the restaurant, David pulled a small wrapped package from his coat pocket and presented it to Emma. "A little something to remember our snow day adventures," he explained as she eagerly tore away the paper. Inside was a snow globe containing a miniature sledding hill with 2 small figures, one large, one small, poised at the top, ready to descend. Emma shook it, delighted as tiny snowflakes swirled around the scene. "It's us," she exclaimed, "Daddy and Emma on the biggest hill. So you'll always remember, even when the real snow melts away," David confirmed, crouching down to her level. "And whenever you shake it, you can think about all the adventures we're going to have together." The gift, thoughtful and symbolic rather than extravagant, touched Sarah deeply. It represented exactly the kind of meaningful connection she had hoped David might eventually establish with Emma. One based on shared experiences and emotional resonance, rather than material indulgence or sporadic grand gestures. Outside the restaurant, as they prepared to go their separate ways, David to his rented house, Sarah and Emma to their apartment, Emma insisted on one final sledding run, despite the rapidly melting snow. "Please, Mommy? Just one more time with Daddy?" "The hill behind our building still has lots of snow in the shady part." Sarah hesitated, aware of the late hour and Emma's approaching bedtime, but something in her daughter's expression, the pure joy of having both parents present, the rare experience of feeling securely held in 2 different kinds of love, made her relent. "One run," she agreed, "and then straight to bed, young lady. It's a school night." Emma cheered, grabbing both their hands and swinging between them as they walked toward Sarah's Toyota. The snow globe clutched carefully in her free hand, the sleds already loaded in the trunk from their afternoon adventure. As they drove the short distance to Sarah's apartment building, Emma chattering happily from the back seat, David turned to Sarah with an expression that combined gratitude and something like peace. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for today, for letting me be part of her life again, for everything." Sarah nodded, understanding the depth of what he was acknowledging. Her role in facilitating his relationship with Emma, her willingness to move beyond the hurt of their past toward a co-parenting relationship that prioritized their daughter's well-being. "She needs you," Sarah replied simply. "She always has." "I'm glad you're finding a way to be there for her, David. Really glad." The final sledding run of the day took place in the fading twilight, the snow indeed still substantial in the shadowed area behind Sarah's apartment building. Emma insisted on both parents participating, positioning them on either side of her on the largest sled, their laughter echoing in the quiet evening air as they careened down the modest hill together. A family transformed, but not broken, different but not diminished, finding a new way to exist in the aftermath of necessary endings. As they climbed the stairs to the apartment afterward, Emma already yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired at all, David hung back slightly, his expression contemplative. "Would it be okay if I came in briefly?" he asked as they reached Sarah's door. "Just to say a proper goodnight to Emma, maybe see this famous stuffed animal collection I keep hearing about." The request was respectful, lacking any hint of presumption or entitlement. Sarah found herself nodding, recognizing the importance of this moment for both David and Emma. The establishment of a new ritual, a new boundary, a new understanding of how their relationship would function moving forward. "Of course," she agreed, unlocking the door and ushering them both inside. "Emma would love to introduce you to the whole menagerie." The next half hour passed in a gentle blur of bedtime preparations. Emma showing David each stuffed animal with solemn introductions, David listening with genuine interest, Sarah supervising teeth brushing and pajama donning with the efficiency of long practice. When the time came for actual sleep, Emma requested that David read her bedtime story, an invitation that visibly moved him. Sarah watched from the doorway as he settled beside Emma's bed, the storybook open on his lap, his voice taking on different characters and inflections as he read. The actor using his talents now for an audience of one, for a purpose more meaningful than commercial success or critical acclaim. After the story, after kisses and hugs and promises of more sledding if the snow lasted, after Emma's eyes finally drifted closed despite her determination to stay awake, Sarah and David retreated to the small living room, their voices low to avoid disturbing their sleeping daughter. "Thank you for tonight," David said as he prepared to leave. "For dinner, for the sledding, for letting me be part of this." He gestured vaguely toward Emma's bedroom, encompassing not just the physical space but the emotional territory of parenthood, of nighttime rituals and bedtime stories, of the thousand small moments that constituted raising a child. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of what he was expressing. "It's a good beginning," she acknowledged. "A new chapter for all of us." David studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You seem happy," he observed. "More settled, more yourself than I've seen you in a long time, even before things went bad between us." The observation, perceptive and seemingly genuine, caught Sarah slightly off guard. "I am," she admitted. "It's taken time and it hasn't been easy, but yes, I'm finding my way to something good here. With Jack," David added, not a question but a gentle acknowledgement. Sarah hesitated, then nodded, feeling no need to deny or minimize what was developing between her and Jack. "He's part of it," she confirmed. "An important part. But it's more than that. It's about building a life that feels authentic, that reflects who I really am rather than who I thought I should be." She smiled slightly. "Something you seem to be discovering yourself." David returned the smile, rueful but genuine. "Better late than never, I suppose. For both of us." There was a moment of shared understanding between them. Two people who had once promised to build a life together, who had failed at that endeavor, but were now finding their separate paths towards something meaningful, something true to their individual natures and needs. "I should go," David said finally. "Early meeting with my agent tomorrow to discuss alternative projects." He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to face Sarah. "For what it's worth, I think Jack's a good man. The kind who builds things to last. Emma's lucky to have him in her life." He hesitated, then added softly, "You both are." The acknowledgement, offered without bitterness or manipulation, touched Sarah deeply. It represented a level of growth, of genuine concern for her and Emma's happiness, that she wouldn't have thought possible from the David she had known during their marriage. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot." After David left, Sarah moved through the apartment, turning off lights, checking locks, completing the small rituals of securing her home for the night. As she paused in Emma's doorway, watching her daughter sleep surrounded by her beloved stuffed animals, the snow globe from David now proudly displayed on her bedside table, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. For Emma's resilience and capacity for joy, for David's unexpected growth and commitment to fatherhood, for Jack's steady presence and open heart, for her own journey from the pain and confusion of divorce to this moment of clarity and possibility. Her phone chimed softly with a text message, Jack checking in as he often did in the evenings. "How did dinner with David go? Everything okay?" Sarah smiled, the simple inquiry warming her more than it probably should. "Better than expected," she replied. "He's decided to stay in Riverside, focus on being a consistent presence in Emma's life, turning down the big role in favor of finding work that lets him be here more." Jack's response came quickly. "That's huge!" A real commitment to Emma. "How are you feeling about it?" The question was typical of Jack. Direct, genuinely interested in her perspective, focused on her emotional well-being rather than merely the practical implications. Sarah considered her answer carefully, wanting to be honest both with Jack and with herself. "Surprised, impressed, grateful for Emma's sake," she typed, "and relieved, I think, to know that she'll have her father in her life in a real way, not just as an occasional visitor or distant figure. She deserves that." "She does," Jack agreed. "And so do you. The peace of mind that comes with knowing she has that stability, that connection. I'm happy for all of you." The generosity of spirit in his response, the genuine pleasure in others' well-being without concern for how it might affect him personally, reinforced what Sarah had been feeling with increasing certainty, that Jack Reynolds was a rare kind of person, someone whose goodness was neither performance nor calculation, but simply the natural expression of who he was. "Thank you," she replied, "for understanding, for supporting, for being you." She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about that kiss." There was a longer pause before Jack's response appeared. "So have I. Pretty much constantly, if I'm being honest." The admission brought a smile to Sarah's face, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the apartment's heating system. "Any conclusions?" she asked, feeling uncharacteristically bold in the quiet darkness of her living room. "Just one," Jack replied, "that I'd very much like to do it again. When you're ready. When the timing is right. No pressure, no rush." The response was so perfectly Jack, respectful of her pace, aware of the complications in her life, offering without demanding, present without pressing. Sarah found herself typing before she could overthink it. "The timing feels right to me. Emma has her art class after school tomorrow. I could stop by the garage around 3:30. Jack's reply was immediate and brought another smile to her face. "I'll be here. With clean hands and no motor oil on my face, I promise." As Sarah prepared for bed, her heart lighter than it had been in years, she found herself contemplating the strange, unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. From Hollywood wife to struggling single mother, from isolation to community, from guarding her heart against further hurt to opening it, cautiously but deliberately, to the possibility of new love. None of it had unfolded as she had planned or expected when she first arrived in Riverside. The path had been neither straight nor smooth, marked by unexpected turns and unanticipated challenges. But standing here now, with Emma secure in her father's renewed commitment, with David finding his way toward authentic parenthood, with Jack offering a kind of partnership based on mutual respect and genuine caring, it felt like exactly where she was meant to be. Not the end of her story, but perhaps the true beginning. Not a fairy tale conclusion, but something better, something real, a life being built day by day, choice by choice, on a foundation of authenticity, courage, and love that had been tested and proven strong enough to support whatever might come next. As she drifted toward sleep, Sarah found herself thinking of Jack's garage, the orderly tools, the projects in various stages of completion, the sense of purpose and craftsmanship that permeated the space. A metaphor, perhaps, for the life they might build together, for the patient, skilled work of creating something lasting from raw materials and careful attention, from vision and persistence, and the willingness to trust the process even when the finished form wasn't yet visible. A life where broken things could be mended, where what appeared beyond repair might be restored with sufficient care and expertise, where second chances weren't just possible, but embraced as opportunities for transformation, for growth, for becoming more fully the people they were meant to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new opportunities for both connection and conflict. But tonight, in this moment, Sarah allowed herself to rest in the certainty that whatever came next, she was no longer facing it alone. That the family she and Emma were creating, unconventional, unexpected, still taking shape, was strong enough to weather the storms, flexible enough to accommodate change, and grounded enough to provide the stability they both deserved. A different kind of happy ending than the one she had once imagined, but perhaps a better one, built on truth rather than illusion, on genuine connection rather than performance, on the solid foundation of who they really were rather than who they had pretended to be. And in that realization, in that acceptance, in that hope for what might yet be built from the pieces of what had been broken, Sarah found a peace she had not known was possible. A coming home to herself, to her strength, to her capacity for both giving and receiving love. To the certain knowledge that some journeys, though difficult and unexpected, lead exactly where we need to go. And that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness, whether from a mechanic offering a hand to a struggling single mother, or from ourselves as we find the courage to begin again, can transform not just circumstances, but hearts. Not just moments, but lives. Not just what is, but what might yet be.